This video is brought to you by The Vine on YouTube and by The Storyteller on Facebook.
Although nearly 40 years of Walt Whitman's life were spent in and near Brooklyn, his biographers have given us, on the whole, comparatively little information concerning his activities there. The minute records of the last years of the poet in Camden, aged and prematurely broken in health, which Horace Traubel has so painstakingly preserved, only serve to emphasize the scantiness of the data which we have concerning the life of Whitman as a Brooklyn journalist.
This video is brought to you by The Vine on YouTube and by The Storyteller on Facebook. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, please like, subscribe, share, make comments. We love feedback. This video is brought to you by The Vine on YouTube and by The Storyteller on Facebook.
Walt Whitman, 1887. Born May 31st, 1819, May 31st, 1819. West Hills, town of Huntington, Long Island, New York. Died March 26, 1892, age 72. Camden, New Jersey. Walter Whitman, May 31st, 1819 to March 26, 1892, was an American poet, essayist, journalist, and humanist. He was a part of the transition between transcendentalism and realism, incorporating both views in his works. Whitman is among the most influential poets in the American canon, often called the father of free verse. His work was very controversial in its time, particularly his poetry collection Leaves of Grass, which was described as obscene for its overt sexuality. Born on Long Island, Whitman worked as a journalist, a teacher, a government clerk, and a volunteer nurse during the American Civil War in addition to publishing his poetry. Early in his career, he also produced a temperance novel, Franklin Evans, 1842. Whitman's major work, Leaves of Grass, was first published in 1855 with his own money. The work was an attempt at reaching out to the common person with an American epic. He continued expanding and revising it until his death in 1892. After a stroke towards the end of his life, he moved to Camden, New Jersey, where his health further declined. He died at age 72, and his funeral became a public spectacle. Whitman's sexuality is often discussed alongside his poetry. Though he is usually labeled as either homosexual or bisexual, it is unclear if Whitman ever had a sexual relationship with another man. Whitman was concerned with politics throughout his life. He supported the Wilmot Proviso and opposed the extension of slavery generally, but did not believe in the abolitionist movement. Contents: 1. Life and work. 1.1 Early life. 1.2 Early career. 1.3 Leaves of Grass. 1.4 Civil War years. 1.5 Health decline and death. 2 Lifestyle and beliefs. 2.1 Alcohol. 2.2 Poetic theory. 2.3 Religion. 2.4 Sexuality. 2.5 Shakespeare authorship. 2.6 Slavery. 3 Legacy and influence. 4 References. 4.1 Notes. 4.2 Bibliography. Life and work. Early life. Walter Whitman was born on May 31st, 1819, in West Hills, town of Huntington, Long Island, to Quaker parents, Walter and Louisa Van Velser Whitman. He was the second of 9 children and was immediately nicknamed Walt to distinguish him from his father. Walter Whitman, Sr. named 3 of his 7 sons after American leaders, Andrew Jackson, George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson. The oldest was named Jesse, and another boy died unnamed at the age of 6 months. The couple's 6th son, the youngest, was named Edward. At age 4, Whitman moved with his family from West Hills to Brooklyn, living in a series of homes in part due to bad investments. Whitman looked back on his childhood as generally restless and unhappy due to his family's difficult economic status. One happy moment that he later recalled was when he was lifted in the air and kissed on the cheek by Marquis de Lafayette during a celebration in Brooklyn on July 4, 1825. At age 11, Whitman concluded formal schooling. He then sought employment, due to his family's financial situation, originally as an office boy for 2 lawyers and later as an apprentice and printer's devil for the weekly Long Island newspaper The Patriot, edited by Samuel E. Clements. Here, Whitman learned about the printing, press, and typesetting. He may have written sentimental bits of filler material for occasional issues. Clements aroused controversy when he and 2 friends attempted to dig up the corpse of Elias Hicks to create a plaster mold of his head. Clements left The Patriot shortly after, possibly as a result of the controversy. Early career. The following summer, Whitman worked for another printer, Erastus Worthington, in Brooklyn. His family moved back to West Hills in the spring, but Whitman remained and took a job at the shop of Alden Spooner, editor of the leading Whig weekly newspaper, the Long Island Star. While at the Star, Whitman became a regular patron of the local library, joined a town debating society, began attending theater performances, and anonymously published some of his earliest poetry in the New York Mirror. At age 16 in May 1835, Whitman left the Star in Brooklyn. He moved to New York City to work as a compositor, though, in later years, Whitman could not remember where. He attempted to find further work, but had difficulty in part due to a severe fire in the printing and publishing district and partly due to a general collapse in the economy leading up to the Panic of 1837. In May 1836, he rejoined his family, now living in Hempstead, Long Island. Whitman taught intermittently at various schools until the spring of 1838, though he was not satisfied as a teacher. After his teaching attempts, Whitman went back to Huntington, New York, to found his newspaper, The Long Islander. Whitman served as publisher, editor, pressman, and distributor, and even provided home delivery. After 10 months, he sold the publication to E. O. Crowell, whose first issue appeared on July 12, 1839. No copies of The Long Islander published under Whitman survive. By the summer of 1839, he found a job as a typesetter in Jamaica, Queens, with the Long Island Democrat, edited by James J. Brenton. He left shortly thereafter, and made another attempt at teaching from the winter of 1840 to the spring of 1841, then moved to New York City in May. There, he initially worked a low-level job at the New World, working under Park Benjamin, Sr., and Rufus Wilmot Griswold. He continued working for short periods for various newspapers, particularly as editor of the Brooklyn Eagle for 2 years, as well as contributing freelance fiction and poetry throughout the 1840s. Leaves of Grass. Walt Whitman, age 37, frontispiece to Leaves of Grass, Fulton St., Brooklyn, NY. Steel engraving by Samuel Hollier from a lost daguerreotype by Gabriel Harrison. Main article, Leaves of Grass. Whitman claimed that after years of competing for the usual rewards, he was determined to become a poet. He first experimented with a variety of popular literary genres which appealed to the cultural tastes of the period. As early as 1850, he began writing what would become Leaves of Grass, a collection of poetry which he would continue editing and revising until his death. Whitman intended to write a distinctly American epic and used free verse with a cadence based on the Bible. At the end of June 1855, Whitman surprised his brothers with the already printed first edition of Leaves of Grass. George didn't think it worth reading. Whitman paid for the publication of the first edition of Leaves of Grass himself and had it printed at a local print shop during their breaks from commercial jobs. 795 copies were printed, though the author's name was not given. Instead, facing the title page was an engraved portrait done by Samuel Hollier. The book received its strongest praise from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who wrote a flattering 5-page letter to Whitman and spoke highly of the book to friends. The first edition of Leaves of Grass was widely distributed and stirred up significant interest, in part due to Emerson's approval, but was occasionally criticized for the seemingly obscene nature of the poetry. Geologist John Peter Leslie wrote to Emerson, calling the book trashy, profane and obscene, and the author a pretentious ass. On July 11, 1855, a few days after Leaves of Grass was published, Whitman's father died at the age of 65. In the months following the first edition of Leaves of Grass, critical responses began focusing more on the potentially offensive sexual themes. Though the second edition was already printed and bound, the publisher almost did not release it. In the end, the edition went to retail, with 20 additional poems, in August 1856. Leaves of Grass was revised and re-released in 1860, again in 1867, and several more times throughout the remainder of Whitman's life. Several well-known writers admired the work enough to visit Whitman, including Bronson Alcott and Henry David Thoreau. Amidst the first publications of Leaves of Grass, Whitman had financial difficulty and was forced to work as a journalist again, specifically with the Brooklyn's Daily Times starting in May 1857. As an editor, he oversaw the paper's contents, contributed book reviews, and wrote editorials. He left the job in 1859, though it is unclear if he was fired or chose to leave. Whitman, who typically kept detailed notebooks and journals, left very little information about himself in the late 1850s. Civil War years. Walt Whitman, circa 1860, by Matthew Brady. As the American Civil War was beginning, Whitman published his poem Beat, Drums, as a patriotic rally call for the North. Whitman's brother George had joined the Union Army and began sending Whitman several vividly detailed letters of the battlefront. On December 16, 1862, a listing of fallen and wounded soldiers in the New York Tribune included First Lieutenant G.W. Whitmore, which Whitman worried was a reference to his brother George. He made his way south immediately to find him, though his wallet was stolen on the way. Walking all day and night, unable to ride, trying to get information, trying to get access to big people, Whitman later wrote, he eventually found George alive, with only a superficial wound on his cheek. Whitman, profoundly affected by seeing the wounded soldiers and the heaps of their amputated limbs, left for Washington on December 28, 1862, to never return to New York. In Washington, D.C., Whitman's friend Charlie Eldridge helped him obtain part-time work in the Army Paymaster's office, leaving time for Whitman to volunteer as a nurse in the Army hospitals. He would write of this experience in The Great Army of the Sick, published in a New York newspaper in 1863, and, 12 years later, in a book called Memoranda. During the war he then contacted Emerson, this time to ask for help in obtaining a government post. Another friend, John Trowbridge, passed on a letter of recommendation from Emerson to Salmon P. Chase, Secretary of the Treasury, hoping he would grant Whitman a position in that department. Chase, however, did not want to hire the author of a disreputable book, referring to Leaves of Grass. The Whitman family had a difficult end to 1864. On September 30th, 1864, Whitman's brother George was captured by Confederates in Virginia. Another brother, Andrew Jackson, died of tuberculosis compounded by alcoholism on December 3rd. That month, Whitman committed his brother Jesse to the Kings County Lunatic Asylum. Whitman's spirits were raised, however, when he finally got a better-paying government post, a low-grade clerk in the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the Department of the Interior, thanks to his friend William Douglas O'Connor. O'Connor, a poet, daguerreotypist, and an editor at the Saturday Evening Post, had written to William Todd Otto, Assistant Secretary of the Interior, on Whitman's behalf. Whitman began the new appointment on January 24, 1865, with a yearly salary of $1,200. A month later, on February 24, 1865, George was released from capture and granted a furlough because of his poor health. By May 1st, Whitman received a promotion to a slightly higher clerkship and published Drum Taps. Effective June 30th, 1865, however, Whitman was fired from his job. His dismissal came from the new Secretary of the Interior, former Iowa Senator James Harlan. Though Harlan dismissed several clerks who were seldom at their respective desks, he may have fired Whitman on moral grounds after finding an 1860 edition of Leaves of Grass. O'Connor protested until J. Hubley Ashton had Whitman transferred to the Attorney General's office on July 1st. O'Connor, though, was still upset and vindicated Whitman by publishing a biased and exaggerated biographical study, The Good Gray Poet, in January 1866. The 50-cent pamphlet defended Whitman as a wholesome patriot, established the poet's nickname, and increased his popularity. Also aiding in his popularity was the publication of O Captain, My Captain, a relatively conventional poem to Abraham Lincoln, the only poem to be anthologized during Whitman's lifetime. Part of Whitman's role in the Attorney General's office was interviewing former Confederate soldiers for presidential pardons. There are real characters among them, he later wrote, and you know I have a fancy for anything out of the ordinary. In August 1866, he took a month off to prepare a new edition of Leaves of Grass which would not be published until 1867 after difficulty in finding a publisher. He hoped it would be its last edition. In February 1868, Poems of Walt Whitman was published in England thanks to the influence of William Michael Rossetti, with minor changes which Whitman reluctantly approved. The edition became popular in England, especially with endorsements from the highly respected N. Gilchrist. Another edition of Leaves of Grass was issued in 1871, the same year it was mistakenly reported that its author died in a railroad accident. As Whitman's international fame increased, he remained working in the Attorney General's office until January 1872. He spent much of 1872 caring for his mother, who was now nearly 80 and struggling with arthritis. He also traveled and was invited to Dartmouth College to give the commencement address on June 26, 1872. Health decline and death. Walt Whitman spent his last few years at his home in Camden, New Jersey. Early in 1873, Whitman suffered a paralytic stroke. His mother died in May the same year. Both events were difficult for Whitman and left him depressed. He moved to Camden, New Jersey to live with his brother George, paying room and board until he bought his own house on Mickle Street in 1884. Around this time, he began socializing with Mary Oakes Davis, the widow of a sea captain, who lived nearby. She moved in with Whitman on February 24, 1885, to serve as his housekeeper in exchange for free rent. She brought with her a cat, a dog, 2 turtle doves, a canary, and other assorted animals. During this time, Whitman produced further editions of Leaves of Grass in 1876, 1881, and 1889. As the end of 1891 approached, he prepared a final edition of Leaves of Grass, an edition that has been nicknamed the Deathbed Edition. He wrote, "L of G at last complete, after 33 years of hackling at it, all times and moods of my life, fair weather and foul, all parts of the land, and peace and war, young and old." Preparing for death, Whitman commissioned a granite mausoleum shaped like a house for $4,000 and visited it often during construction. In the last week of his life, he was too weak to lift a knife or fork and wrote, "I suffer all the time. I have no relief, no escape. It is monotony, 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 in pain." Whitman died on March 26, 1892. An autopsy revealed his lungs had diminished to 1/8 their normal breathing capacity, a result of bronchial pneumonia, and that an egg-sized abscess on his chest had eroded one of his ribs. The cause of death was officially listed as pleurisy of the left side, consumption of the right lung, general military tuberculosis, and parenchymatous nephritis. A public viewing of his body was held at his Camden home. Over 1,000 people visited in 3 hours, and Whitman's oak coffin was barely visible because of all the flowers and wreaths left for him. He was buried in his tomb at Harley Cemetery in Camden 4 days after his death. Another public ceremony was held at the cemetery, with friends giving speeches, live music, and refreshments. Later, the remains of Whitman's parents and 2 of his brothers and their families were moved to the mausoleum. Lifestyle and Beliefs. Portrait of Whitman by Thomas Akins, 1887-88. Alcohol. Whitman was a vocal proponent of temperance and rarely drank alcohol. He once claimed he did not taste strong liquor until he was 30 and occasionally argued for prohibition. One of his earliest long-fiction works, the novel Franklin Evans, or The Inebriate, first published November 23, 1842, is a temperance novel. Whitman wrote the novel at the height of popularity of the Washingtonian movement, though the movement itself was plagued with contradictions, as was Franklin Evans. Years later, Whitman claimed he was embarrassed by the book and called it a damned rot. He dismissed it by saying he wrote the novel in 3 days solely for money while he was under the influence of alcohol himself. Even so, he wrote other pieces recommending temperance, including The Madman and a short story, Reuben's Last Wish. Poetic theory. Whitman wrote in the preface to the 1855 edition of Leaves of Grass, "The proof of a poet is that his country absorbs him as affectionately as he has absorbed it." He believed there was a vital, symbiotic relationship between the poet and society. This connection was emphasized especially in Song of Myself by using an all-powerful first-person narration. As an American epic, it deviated from the historic use of an elevated hero and instead assumed the identity of the common people. Leaves of Grass also responded to the impact that recent urbanization in the United States had on the masses. Religion. Whitman was deeply influenced by deism. He denied any one faith was more important than another and embraced all religions equally. In Song of Myself, he gave an inventory of major religions and indicated he respected and accepted all of them, a sentiment he further emphasized in his poem with antecedents, affirming, "I adopt each theory, myth, god, and demigod. I see that the old accounts, Bibles, genealogies, are true, without exception." In 1874, he was invited to write a poem about the spiritualism movement, to which he responded, "It seems to me nearly altogether a poor, cheap, crude humbug." Whitman was a religious skeptic. Though he accepted all churches, he believed in none. Sexuality. Whitman and Peter Doyle, one of the men with whom Whitman was believed to have had an intimate relationship. Whitman's sexuality is sometimes disputed, although often assumed to be bisexual based on his poetry. The concept of heterosexual and homosexual personalities was invented in 1868, and it was not widely promoted until Whitman was an old man. Whitman's poetry depicts love and sexuality in a more earthy, individualistic way common in American culture before the medicalization of sexuality in the late 1800s. The Leaves of Grass was often labeled pornographic or obscene. Only one critic remarked on its author's presumed sexual activity. In a November 1855 review, Rufus Wilmot Griswold suggested Whitman was guilty of that horrible sin not to be mentioned among Christians. Whitman had intense friendships with many men throughout his life. Some biographers have claimed that he may not have engaged in sexual relationships with men, while others cite letters, journal entries, and other sources which they claim as proof of the sexual nature of some of his relationships. Biographer David S. Reynolds described a man named Peter Doyle as being the most likely candidate for the love of Whitman's life. Doyle was a bus conductor whom he met around 1866. They were inseparable for several years. Interviewed in 1895, Doyle said, "We were familiar at once. I put my hand on his knee. We understood. He did not get out at the end of the trip. In fact, went back with me." A more direct second-hand account comes from Oscar Wilde. Wilde met Whitman in America in 1882 and wrote to the homosexual rights activist George Cecil Ives that there was no doubt about the great American poet's sexual orientation. "I have the kiss of Walt Whitman still on my lips," he boasted. The only explicit description of Whitman's sexual activities is second-hand. In 1924, Edward Carpenter, then an old man, described an erotic encounter he had had in his youth with Whitman to Gavin Arthur, who recorded it in detail in his journal. Late in his life, when Whitman was asked outright if his series of Calamus poems were homosexual, he chose not to respond. There is also some evidence that Whitman may have had sexual relationships with women. He had a romantic friendship with a New York actress named Ellen Gray in the spring of 1862, but it is not known whether or not it was also sexual. He still had a photo of her decades later when he moved to Camden and referred to her as an old sweetheart of mine. In a letter dated August 21, 1890, he claimed, "I have had 6 children. 2 are dead." This claim has never been corroborated. Toward the end of his life, he often told stories of previous girlfriends and sweethearts and denied an allegation from the New York Herald that he had never had a love affair. Shakespeare authorship. Whitman was a proponent of the Shakespeare authorship question, refusing to believe in the historical attribution of the work to William Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon. Whitman comments in his November Bouse, 1888, regarding Shakespeare's historical plays. Conceived out of the fullest heat and pulse of European feudalism, personifying in unparalleled ways the medieval aristocracy, its soaring spirit of ruthless and gigantic caste, with its own peculiar air and arrogance, no mere imitation, only one of the wolfish earls so plenteous in the plays themselves, or some born descendant and knower, might seem to be the true author of those amazing works in some respects greater than anything else in recorded literature. Slavery. Whitman opposed the extension of slavery in the United States and supported the Wilmot Proviso. However, he was not an abolitionist and believed the movement did more harm than good. He once wrote that the abolitionists had slowed the advancement of their cause by their altruism and officiousness. His main concern was that their methods disrupted the democratic process. as did the refusal of the Southern states to put the interests of the nation as a whole above their own. Whitman also subscribed to the widespread opinion that even free African Americans should not vote and was concerned at the increasing number of African Americans in the legislature. Legacy and influence. Walt Whitman has been claimed as America's first poet of democracy, a title meant to reflect his ability to write in a singularly American character. A British friend of Walt Whitman, Mary Smith Whittle Costello, wrote, "You cannot understand America without Walt Whitman, without Leaves of Grass." He has expressed that civilization, up to date, as he would say, and no student of the philosophy of history can do without him. Modernist poet Ezra Pound called Whitman America's poet. He is America. Andrew Carnegie called him the great poet of America so far. Edward Hopper, who knew Whitman's poetry well, was, like the poet, a brilliant impresario of the archetype. Hopper's pictures of naked women by their windows were, says the critic, Walter Wells, most likely influenced by Whitman, most notably the poet's controversial "A Woman Waits for Me." The literary critic Harold Bloom wrote, as the introduction for the 150th anniversary of Leaves of Grass, "If you are American, then Walt Whitman is your imaginative father and mother, even if, like myself, you have never composed a line of verse." You can nominate a fair number of literary works as candidates for the secular scripture of the United States. They might include Melville's Moby Dick, Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and Emerson's 2 series of essays and The Conduct of Life. None of those, not even Emerson's, are as central as the first edition of Leaves of Grass. Whitman considered himself a Messiah-like figure in poetry. Others agreed. One of his admirers, William Sloane Kennedy, speculated that people will be celebrating the birth of Walt Whitman as they are now the birth of Christ. Whitman's work breaks the boundaries of poetic form and is generally prose-like. He also used unusual images and symbols in his poetry, including rotting leaves, tufts of straw, and debris. He also openly wrote about death and sexuality, including prostitution. He is often labeled as the father of free verse, though he did not invent it. Whitman's vagabond lifestyle was adopted by the Beat movement and its leaders such as Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac in the 1950s and 1960s, as well as anti-war poets like Adrienne Rich and Gary Snyder. Whitman also influenced Bram Stoker, author of Dracula, and was the model for the character of Dracula. Stoker said in his notes that Dracula represented the quintessential male which, to Stoker, was Whitman, with whom he corresponded until Whitman's death.
This video is brought to you by The Vine on YouTube and by The Storyteller on Facebook. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, please like, subscribe, share, make comments, love feedback. This video is brought to you by The Vine on YouTube and by The Storyteller on Facebook.
Whitman's Calamus, a rhetorical prehistory of the first gay American. Author's note. I hope this paper will be the germ of a much larger work on the Calamus poems. Any suggestions will be appreciated. Historical critics now see that the striking images of the body electric in Leaves of Grass, the body charged with sexual energy, open to entreaties of companions male and female, driven by consuming desire, containing the sources of both mental and political power, were not exclusively the product of an inspired individual, but were socially constructed. In Whitman's time, the sexualized body became a site of anxiety and fascination fully acknowledged and explicitly voiced in medical writing, social purity pamphlets, self-help books, and popular science, as well as pulp fiction, pornography, and underground confessional literature. Only a literary history focused entirely on the literature of parlors, schoolrooms, and highbrow literary journals could view Whitman's poetry of the body as unalloyed in its originality. But Leaves of Grass remains distinctive not only in the wildness and enduring power of its style of celebrating the body, but also in recording the emergence of a special ethos of modern life, which Foucault has called the homosexual species. All of what contemporary theory says about discourse and the formation of socio-political identity suggests that Whitman was the first gay American. No doubt, there was homosexual experience in his day, but no category of consciousness, no recognizable public lifestyle, no discourse of gayness. The other times and other cultures had developed a discourse and social code that provided men who loved other men exclusively with public life. Witness notable instances in ancient Greece and among the Plains Indians in North America. Modern Western culture produced nothing of this sort. 19th century texts dealing explicitly with homosexuality are very rare, even among medical and legal writings. The word gay had at best an underground life as an insider's code, and the clinical word homosexual had no life at all. So, if gay history requires not only evidence of behavior, but also a coherent discourse, the words, the code, the style that would make a group conscious and distinctive, Whitman was prehistorically gay, alive in a time of traces, faint clues and indirections. The textual history of Leaves of Grass, as well as the book's reception among the founders of gay politics, gay literary criticism, and gay history suggests that Whitman provided something like a manual of discourse, the tropic patterns, and habits of appeal, a rhetoric that creates the possibility of distinction and identification, a text which embodies the story of gayness coming into conscious expression. The emergence of the Calamus poems into Leaves of Grass represents the kind of discursive eruption that precedes the codification of identity terms and public codes. The Calamus poet broke with tradition and with his own earlier patterns of representation. The poems Whitman wrote before Calamus, and even the stories that antedated Leaves of Grass, hint frequently at homosexual activity and are often flagrantly homoerotic, but they are relatively well integrated into what James Miller has called an omnisexual vision. With Calamus, something changed for Whitman. For one thing, he rarely wrote poems on sexual themes after Calamus appeared, themes that he had treated obsessively before. For another thing, he subtly revised the old poems in such a way as to soften and often obscure images of sexual engagement, in many ways, bringing them more into line with the standard established in Calamus. In previous writings, I have joined others in arguing that Whitman gave up fighting the battle of sexual liberator to become a national poet more amenable to a Victorian readership, that he began to disguise, to code, to blunt the energy of his early sexual politics before he gave up on the project entirely. But what if he stopped writing about sex after Calamus, because in Calamus he found a treatment of his topic that suited him once and for all? I've come to see Calamus both as a key text in the history of gay discourse, generating issues of reader response and reception history which require more research and more time than I have to cover today, and as a culmination of Whitman's rhetoric of sexuality, a topic whose broad outlines I briefly trace in this paper. The special rhetoric of Calamus results largely from its isolation of same-sex love from other types of erotic attraction. The group of poems appeared for the first time in the third edition of Leaves of Grass in 1860, in tandem with Children of Adam, a grouping which attempts a similar kind of isolation for poems of heterosexual love. Mainly adaptations of previously composed poems, Children of Adam may best be read as itself resulting from the rhetoric of Calamus, a record of the poet's effort to balance the intensity of the homoerotic poems. The balancing strategy fits nicely with Whitman's understanding of the difference between male-female love and male-male love, an understanding based on two terms he borrowed from phrenology, amativeness and adhesiveness. In a famous notebook entry written in 1870, he uses his balance terms again to urge himself to suppress a diseased, feverish disproportionate adhesiveness, apparently his term for homoerotic attraction. Like phrenology, which was a science of balance, of keeping all psychological faculties from developing to excess, the balancing act of his personal life is reflected in the rhetorical balancing of the two sections in the 1860 Leaves. He strained to achieve the effect. At least one of the poems, Once I Passed Through a Populous City, could be placed in Children of Adam only after Whitman changed the gender of the speaker's lover, a woman I casually met there who detained me for the love of me. WCP 266. The woman was a man, in the manuscript version. Children of Adam lacks the thematic and stylistic unity of the 1860 Calamus, which was yet the more closely unified in the manuscript. The manuscript version seems comparable to an Elizabethan sonnet cycle in using a series of short lyrics to narrate a story of personal love. No wonder that with the study of the manuscripts, biographical scholars speculate that Whitman had a homosexual affair that broke off in the late 1850s, an affair that would account for the tone of the darkness of Calamus. The dark tone comes from the sense of alienation that creeps among the genial optimism of earlier poems and seems to qualify the universalizing boasts of the friendly and flowing savage who was the speaker and dominant character of the longest poems in the 1855 and 1856 editions. In many ways, the Calamus persona seems more like the characters to whom the 1855 speaker offers encouragement and aid, the 29th father, the sleeper troubled by erotic desire, the sufferer of unrequited love. The earlier poems suggest a full sympathy between the confident speaker and his fellow human beings, as well as a deep identification with nature. In an exemplary moment, the speaker of Spontaneous Me identifies real poems with his penis, this poem drooping shy and unseen that I'd always carry, and that all men carry, WCP 260. In one sweep, he equates writing with the natural act of regeneration and makes the poet the representative of all men. The poem metaphorically associates natural objects with the sexualized body of the poet, creating a distinctively phallic landscape. Spontaneous me, nature. The loving day, the mounting sun, the friend I am happy with. The arm of my friend hanging over my shoulder. The hillside whitened with blossoms of the mountain ash. The rich coverlet of the grass, animals, and birds, the private untrimmed bank, bank, the primitive apples, pebble stones. Beautiful dripping fragments, the negligent list of one after another as I happen to call them to me or think of them. WCP 260. The friend I am happy with mentioned here is of unnamed gender. The context suggests male even though the poem, first published in 1856, was always part of Children of Adam after 1860. The placement is rhetorically consistent, however, for whenever Whitman treats sexuality either as a general form of attraction or as heterosexual or procreative, he metaphors freely in all directions, finding analogues of the experience of his own body in all of nature. In Children of Adam and in such longer lyrics as Song of Myself and The Sleepers, the implication is that the speaker's libido is justified by the presence of analogues in nature. It is natural. With Calamus comes a major shift in perspective. The same images bear new significances. The branches of live oak in Song of Myself, for example, mirror the rooted phallic power of the speaker, but in I Saw in Louisiana a Live Oak Growing, possibly the first poem composed for Calamus, which was called Live Oak, with moss in the manuscript version, the confident link of the poet with the natural world has been broken. The manly branch of the tree hung with moss still reminds the poet of his own body, but he cannot honestly complete the heroic identification. He says, I wondered how it could utter joyous leave standing all alone there without its friends near, for I knew I could not. WCP 279. The poem details the process by which the poet switches from a metaphoric to metonymic or associational rhetoric. He no longer identifies himself with the object of nature, but keeps a twig of the tree twined with moss as a curious token that helps him think of manly love. Rather than deeply connected with nature, as heterosexual love appears to be because of its functional relation to procreation, homosexual or manly love bears a more complex and subtle relation to nature, which includes a recognition of a difference from the procreative standard. The Cosmos poet of Song of Myself could proclaim, these are the thoughts of all men in all ages and lands, WCP 204, but the Calamus poet has lost the connection and the confidence. In a poem ultimately omitted from Leaves of Grass, but included in 1860 as Calamus 9, he laments, sullen and suffering hours. I am ashamed, but it is useless, I am what I am. Hours of my torment, I wonder if other men ever have the like, out of the like feelings. Is there even one other like me distracted, his friend, his lover, lost to him? LGC 596. The association of erotic love with the outdoor world remains present in Calamus. The forlorn speaker of Calamus 9 still withdraws to a lonely and unfrequented spot. The speaker of the opening Calamus poem in Paths Untrodden takes as his setting the growth by the margins of pond waters / escaped from the life that exhibits itself. WCP 268, the waters of the ocean whisper to congratulate the speaker on the approach of his lover in When I'd Heard at the Close of the Day. WCP 277. And the central image of the group, the calamus plant, is itself a phallic symbol. But the free-flowing metaphorical identification with the world and omnisexual vision are gone. Nature has become an environment, something that surrounds and suggests, rather than a bank of justifying identifications. It whispers rather than shouts approval. The movement away from strong appeals to nature toward weak appeals to nature is paralleled by a shift from appeals to natural history toward appeals to social history. In Song of Myself, I sing the body electric, and a woman waits for me. Whitman relies upon the language and concepts of biological science, notably evolution, to provide grounds for celebrating the omnisexual body. But in Calamus, appeals tend to be based on the poet's claim to the distinction within the realm of social history. The key poem on this theme is Recorder's Ages Hence. Recorder's Ages Hence. Come, I will take you down underneath this impassive exterior. I will tell you what to say of me. Publish my name and hang up my picture as that of the most tender of lovers. The friend of the lover's portrait, of whom his friend his lover was fondest. Who was not proud of his songs, but of the measureless ocean of love within him, and freely poured it forth. Who often walked lonesome walks thinking of his dear friends, his lovers. Who pensive away from the one he loved often lay sleepless and dissatisfied at night. who knew too well the sick dread lest the one he loved secretly be indifferent to him, whose happiest days were far away through fields, in the woods, on hills, he and another wandering hand in hand, they twain apart from other men, who oft as he sauntered the streets curved with his arm the shoulder of his friend, while the arm of his friend rested upon him also. WCP 275-76. The poem reprises all the main, calamus, themes, showing the range of emotion and the depth of Whitman's changes in self-concept. The theme of alienation takes a prominent place, appearing as a melancholic sense of difference, the sick dread, as joy over the lover's isolation, they twain apart from other men, and as a sense of distinction based on historical uniqueness. The speaker is not just a tender lover but is the very model of tenderness, the most tender of all. The tenderness is accompanied by a new caution on the part of the calamus poet. No longer the confident boaster of the early poems, breaking free of social and poetic convention alike, the calamus poet tends to appropriate and subvert convention rather than destroy it, as Michael Lynch and others have shown in studies of Whitman's use of the friendship convention and elegiac themes as a code for homoeroticism. Moreover, there appears in the calamus rhetoric a movement away from the claim of full disclosure, the promise of song of myself to go undisguised and naked, toward a complex interplay of revealing and concealing a secret at the center of identity. In the 1855 preface, Whitman had argued, the great poets are also to be known by the absence in them of tricks and by the justification of perfect personal candor. How beautiful is candor! All faults may be forgiven of him who has perfect candor. WCP 19. Even in the 1855 preface, there exists some tension between the great poet's traits of sympathy, the tendency to merge with others, and prudence, the tendency to balance self-assertion with self-protection. But sympathy, honesty, and the drive to confession and self-display rule the day in 1855 and 1856. In Calamus, confession does not flow, but is painful and dangerous, yet equally transformative, like a ritual bloodletting, as we see in the poem, Trickle Drops. From my breast, from where I was concealed, press forth red drops, confession drops. Stain every page, stain every song I sing, every word I say, bloody drops. Let them know your scarlet heat, let them glisten. Saturate them with yourself, all ashamed and wet. Blow upon all I have written, or shall write bleeding drops. Let it all be seen, in your light, blushing drops. WCP 278. Nor can confession be complete, for the poet is uncertain not only of his connection with nature, but also of his relation to other men. The feelings expressed in Calamus 9 of 1860, hours continuing long, are those of the closeted game, sending out sensitive feelers in an attempt to connect with others of his kind. Hours of my torment, I wonder if other men ever have the like, out of the like feelings. If there is even one like me distracted, his friend, his lover, lost to him. Is he too as I am now? Does he still rise, in the morning, dejected, thinking, who is lost to him? And at night, awaking, think, who is lost? Does he harbor his friendship, silent and endless? Harbor his anguish and passion? Does some stray reminder, or the casual mention of a name, bring the fit back upon him, taciturn and depressed? LGC 596. Finally, even this level of confession was too much for Whitman. He excluded this poem from later editions of Leaves of Grass, and his revisions tended to obscure the original narrative thread of Live Oak with Moss, to hide its possible origins in personal experience. In biography as well as a bibliography, he replicated the form of alternately revealing and concealing the depths of his heart. As Gary Schmidgall has shown in great detail, Whitman taunted Horace Traubel with the promise to tell a secret that would explain himself better than any other. He never fulfilled the promise. These movements, then, characterize the rhetorical shift that Calamus undertakes in Leaves of Grass, the movement from strong appeals, metaphoric identifications, toward weak appeals to nature, metonymic associations, the movement from appeals to natural history, as in the concept of evolution, toward appeals to social history, as in the concept of distinction, the movement from rejecting existing literary conventions toward appropriating and subverting such conventions, and the movement away from claims of full disclosure toward a complex interplay of revealing and concealing a secret at the center of identity. This last shift hints at the depth of the changes. In his History of Sexuality, Foucault mentions a metamorphosis in literature that has occurred in modern times. We have passed, he says, from a pleasure to be recounted and heard, centering on the heroic or marvelous narration of trials of bravery or sainthood, to a literature ordered according to the infinite task of extracting from the depths of oneself, in between the words, a truth which the very form of the confession holds out like a shimmering mirage. 59. In the 5 short years between 1855 and 1860, in the shift from the rhetoric of omnisexuality to the rhetoric of gayness, Whitman embodied in his verse something like this cultural passage. The attempt to recover a heroic sexual politics of liberation by using confession and full disclosure to advantage yielded to a recognition of the pain and alienation that accompanies confession, the urge to reveal chastened by the need to conceal, the joy of identity mingling with the ambivalent emotions that come with distinction and difference.
This video is brought to you by The Vine on YouTube and by The Storyteller on Facebook. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, please like, subscribe, share, make comments, give up feedback. This video is brought to you by The Vine on YouTube and by The Storyteller on Facebook.
Walt Whitman. I celebrate myself, and sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume. For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I loaf and invite my soul. I lean and loaf at my ease observing a spear of summer grass. My tongue, every atom of my blood, formed from this soil, this air. Born here of parents born here, from parents the same, and there. Parents the same. I, now 37 years old in perfect health begin, hoping to cease, not till death. Creeds and schools in abeyance. Retiring back a while sufficed at what they are, but never forgotten. I harbor for good or bad, I permit to speak at every hazard. Nature without check, with original energy. Houses and rooms are full of perfumes, the shelves are crowded with perfumes. I breathe a fragrance myself, and know it and like it. The distillation would intoxicate me also, but I shall not let it. The atmosphere is not a perfume, it has no taste of the distillation, it is odorless. It is for my mouth forever, I am in love with it. I will go to the bank by the wood and become undisguised and naked. I am mad for it to be in contact with me. The smoke of my own breath. Echoes, ripples, buzzed whispers, love root, silk thread, crotch and vine. My respiration and inspiration, the beating of my heart, the passing of blood and air through my lungs. The sniff of green leaves and dry leaves, and of the shore end. Dark-colored sea rocks, and of hay in the barn. The sound of the belched words of my voice loosed to the eddies of the wind. A few light kisses, a few embraces, reaching around arms. The play of light and shade on the trees as the supple boughs wag. The delight alone, or in the rush of the streets, or along the fields and hillsides. The feeling of health, the full noon trill, the song of me rising from bed and meeting the sun. Have you reckoned 1,000 acres much? Have you reckoned the earth much? Have you practiced so long to learn to read? Have you felt so proud to get at the meaning of poems? Stop this day and night with me, and you shall possess the origin of all poems. You shall possess the good of the earth and sun. There are millions of suns left. You shall no longer take things at second or third hand, nor look through the eyes of the dead, nor feed on the spectres in books. You shall not look through my eyes either, nor take things from me. You shall listen to all sides and filter them from yourself. I have heard what the talkers were talking, the talk of the beginning and the end. But I do not talk of the beginning nor the end. There was never any more inception than there is now, nor any more youth or age than there is now, and will never be any more perfection than there is now, nor any more heaven or hell than there is now. Urge and urge and urge. Always the procreant urge of the world. Out of the dimness opposite equals advance, always substance and increase, always sex. Always a knit of identity, always distinction, always a breed of life. To elaborate is no avail, learned and unlearned feel that it is so. Sure as the most certain sure, plumb in the uprights, well. Centralized, braced in the beams. Stout as a horse, affectionate, haughty, electrical. I am this mystery here we stand. Clear and sweet is my soul, and clear and sweet is all that is not my soul. Lack one lacks both, and the unseen is proved by the seen, till that becomes unseen and receives a proof in its turn. Showing the best and dividing it from the worst age vexes age. Knowing the perfect fitness and equanimity of things, while they discuss I am silent, and go gaze and admire myself. Welcome is every organ and attribute of me, and of any man hearty and clean. Not an inch, nor a particle of an inch, is vile, and none shall be less familiar than the rest. I am satisfied, I see, dance, laugh, sing, as the hugging and loving bedfellow sleeps at my side through the night, and withdraws at the peep of the day with stealthy tread. leaving me baskets covered with white towels swelling the house with their plenty. Shall I postpone my acceptance and realization and scream at my eyes that they turn from gazing after and down the road, and forthwith cipher and show me to assent exactly the value of one and exactly the value of two, and which is ahead? Trippers and askers surround me. People I meet, the effect upon me as my early life or the ward and the city I live in or the nation. The latest dates, discoveries, inventions, societies, authors old and new. My dinner, dress, associates, looks, compliments, dues. The real or fancied indifference of some man or woman I love. The sickness of one of my folks or of myself, or ill-doing or loss, or lack of money, or depressions, or exaltations. Battles, the horrors of fratricidal war, the fever of doubtful news, the fitful events. These come to me days and nights and go from me again. But they are not the me myself. Apart from the pulling and hauling stands what I am. Stands amused, complacent, compassionating, idle, unitary. Looks down, is erect, or bends an arm on an impalpable certain rest. Looking with side-curved head curious what will come next. Both in and out of the game and watching and wondering at it. Backward I see in my own days where I sweated through fog with linguists and contenders. I have no mocking or arguments. I witness and wait. I believe in you, my soul. The other I am must not abase itself to you, and you must not be abased to the other. Loaf with me on the grass, loose the stop from your throat. Not words, not music or rhyme I want, not custom or lecture, not even the best. Only the lull I like, the hum of your vowed voice. I mind how once we lay such a transparent summer morning. How you settled your head athwart my hips and gently turned over upon me, and parted the shirt from my bosom bone, and plunged your tongue to my bare stripped heart, and reached till you felt my beard, and reached till you held my feet. Swiftly arose and spread around me the peace and knowledge that passed all the argument of the earth. And I know that the hand of God is the promise of my own. And I know that the Spirit of God is the brother of my own. And that all the men ever born are also my brothers, and the women my sisters and lovers. And that a keelson of the creation is love. And limitless are leaves stiff or drooping in the fields, and brown ants in the little wells beneath them, and mossy scabs of the worm fence, heaped stones, elder, mullein, and pokeweed. The child said, "What is the grass?" fetching it to me with full hands. How could I answer the child? I do not know what it is any more than he. I guess it must be the flag of my disposition, out of hopeful green stuff, is woven. Or I guess it is the handkerchief of the Lord, a scented gift and remembrance designedly dropped, bearing the owner's name some way in the corners, that we may see and remark, and say whose. Or I guess the grass is itself a child, the produced babe of the vegetation. Or I guess it is a uniform hieroglyphic, and it means sprouting alike in broad zones and narrow zones, growing among black folks as among white. Canuck, Tuckahoe, Congressman, thus, I give them the same, I receive them the same. And now it seems to me the beautiful uncut hair of graves. Tenderly will I use you curling grass. It may be you transpire from the breasts of young men. It may be if I had known them, I would have loved them. It may be you are from old people, or from offspring taken soon out of their mother's laps. And here you are the mother's laps. This grass is very dark to be from the white heads of old mothers, darker than the colorless beards of old men, dark to come from under the faint red roofs of mouths. Oh, I perceive after all so many uttering tongues, and I perceive they do not come from the roofs of mouths for nothing. I wish I could translate the hints about the dead young men and women and the hints about old men and mothers, and the offspring took soon out of their laps. What do you think has become of the young and old men? And what do you think has become of the women and children? They are alive and well somewhere. The smallest sprout shows there is really no death. And if ever there was it led forward life, and does not wait at the end to arrest it. And then ceased the moment life appeared. All goes onward and outward, nothing collapses. And to die is different from what anyone supposed, and luckier. Has anyone supposed it lucky to be born? I hasten to inform him or her that it is just as lucky to die, and I know it. I pass death, with the dying and birth, with the new-washed babe, and am not contained between my hat and boots, and peruse manifold objects, no two alike, and every one good. The earth and the stars, and their adjuncts all good. I am not an earth, nor an adjunct of an earth. I am the mate and companion of people, all just as immortal and fathomless as myself. They do not know how immortal, but I know. Every kind for itself, and its own, for me mine male and female. For me those that have been boys, and those that love women. For me, the man is proud, and feels how it stings, to be slighted. For me the sweetheart, and the old maid, for me mothers, and the mothers of mothers. For me lips that have smiled, eyes that have shed tears. For me children, and the begetters of children. Undrape. You are not guilty to me, nor stale, nor discarded. I see through the broadcloth and gingham whether or no, and am around, tenacious, acquisitive, tireless, and cannot be shaken away. The little one sleeps in its cradle. I lift the gauze and look for a long time, and silently brush away flies with my hand. The youngster and the red-faced girl turn aside up the bushy hill. I view them from the top. The suicide sprawls on the bloody floor of the bedroom. I witness the corpse with its dabbled hair. I note where the pistol has fallen. The blab of the pave, tires of carts, fluff of boot soles, talk of the promenades. The heavy omnibus, the driver with his interrogating thumb, the clank of the shod horses on the granite floor. The snow sleighs, clinking, shouted jokes, pelts of snowballs. The hurrahs for popular favorites, the fury of roused mobs. The flap of the curtained litter, a sick man inside borne to the hospital. The meeting of enemies, the sudden oath, the blows and fall. The excited crowd, the policeman with his star quickly working his passage to the center of the crowd. The impassive stones that receive in return so many echoes. What groans of overfed or half-starved who fall sunstruck or in fits. What exclamations of women taken suddenly who hurry home and give birth to babes. What living and buried speech is always vibrating here, what howls, restrained by decorum. Arrests of criminals, flights, adulterous offers made, acceptances, rejections with convex lips. I mind them, or the show or resonance of the mic, come and I depart. The big doors of the country barn stand open and ready. The dried grass of the harvest time loads the slow-drawn wagon. The clear light plays on the brown, gray, and green intertwined. The armfuls are packed to the sagging mow. I am there. I help. I came stretched atop of the load. I felt its soft jolts. One leg reclined on the other. I jump from the crossbeams and seize the clover and timothy, and roll head over heels and tangle my hair full of wisps. Alone, far in the wilds and mountains, I hunt, wandering amazed at my own lightness and glee. In the late afternoon, choosing a safe spot to pass the night, kindling a fire and broiling fresh killed game, falling asleep on the gathered leaves with my dog and gun by my side. The Yankee clipper is under her skysails. She cuts the sparkle. And scud. My eyes settle the land. I bend at her prow or shout joyously from the deck. The boatmen and clam diggers arose early and stopped for me. I tucked my trouser ends in my boots and went and had a good time. You should have been with us that day round the chowder kettle. I saw the marriage of the trapper in the open air in the far west. The bride was a red girl. Her father and his friends sat near cross-legged and dumbly smoking. They had moccasins to their feet and large thick blankets hanging from their shoulders. On a bank lounged the trapper. He was dressed mostly in skins. His luxuriant beard and curls protected his neck. He held his bride by the hand. She had long eyelashes. Her head was bare. Her coarse straight locks descended upon her voluptuous limbs and reached to her feet. The runaway slave came to my house and stopped outside. I heard his motions, crackling the twigs of the woodpile. Through the swung half-door of the kitchen, I saw him limply and weak, and went where he sat on a log and led him in and assured him, and brought water and filled a tub for his sweated body and bruised feet, and gave him a room that entered from my own, and gave him some coarse clean clothes, and remember perfectly well his revolving eyes and his awkwardness, and remember putting plasters on the galls of his neck and ankles. He stayed with me a week before he was recuperated and passed north. I had him sit next to me at the table. My firelock leaned in the corner. 28 young men bathed by the shore. 28 young men, and also friendly. 28 years of womanly life, and also lonesome. She owns the fine house by the rise of the bank. She hides handsome and richly dressed after the blinds of the window. Which of the young men does she like the best? The homeliest of them is beautiful to her. Where are you off to, lady? For I see you. You splash in the water there, yet stay still in your room. Dancing and laughing along the beach came the 29th. Stay there. The rest did not see her, but she saw them and loved them. The beards of the young men glistened with wet. It ran from their long hair. Little streams passed all over their bodies. An unseen hand also passed over their bodies. It descended tremblingly from their temples and ribs. The young men flowed on their backs. Their white bellies bulged to the sun. They do not ask who seizes fast to them. They do not know who puffs and declines with pendant and bending arch. They do not think whom they souse with spray. The butcher boy puts off his killing clothes or sharpens his knife. At the stall in the market, I loiter enjoying his repartee and his shuffle and breakdown. Blacksmiths with grinned and hairy chests environ the anvil. Each has his own main sledge. They are all out. There is a great heat in the fire. From the cinder-strewed threshold, I follow their movements. The lithe sheer of their waists plays even with their massive arms. Overhand the hammers swing, overhand so slow, overhand so sure. They do not hasten. Each man hits in his place. The Negro holds firmly the reins of his 4 horses. The block swags underneath on its tied-over chain. The Negro that drives the long dray of the stone yard, steady-end. Tall he stands poised on one leg on the string piece. His blue shirt exposes his ample neck and breast and loosens over his hip band. His glance is calm and commanding. He tosses the slouch of his hat away from his forehead. The sun falls on his crispy hair and mustache, falls on the black of his polished and perfect limbs. I behold the picturesque giant and love him, and I do not stop there. I go with the team also. In me, the caresser of life, wherever moving, backward as well as forward, slewing. Niches aside and junior bending, not a person or object missing. Absorbing all to myself, and for this song. Oxen that rattle the yoke and chain or halt in the leafy shade, what is that you express in your eyes? It seems to me more than all the print I have read in my life. My tread scares the wood drake and wood duck on my distant end. Day-long ramble. They rise together, they slowly circle around. I believe in those winged purposes, and acknowledge red, yellow, white, playing within me, and consider green and violet and the tufted crown intentional. And do not call the tortoise unworthy, because she is not something else. And the in the woods never studied the gamut, yet trills pretty well to me. And the look of the bay mare shamed silliness out of me. The wild gander leads his flock through the cool night. Yahonk, he says, and sounds it down to me like an invitation. The purr may suppose it meaningless, but I listen close, find its purpose, and place up there toward the wintry sky the sharp-hoofed moose of the north, the cat on the house sill, the chickadee, the prairie dog, the litter of the grunting sow as they tug at her teats, the brood of the turkey hen, and she with her half-spread wings. I see in them and myself the same old law. The press of my foot to the earth springs 100 affections. They scorn the best I can do to relate them. I am enamored of growing outdoors, of men that live among cattle, or taste of the ocean or woods, of the builders and navigators of ships, and the wielders of axes and mauls, and the drivers of horses. I can eat and sleep with them week in and week out. What is commonest, cheapest, nearest, easiest, is me. Me going in for my chances, spending for vast returns, adorning myself to bestow me on the first that will take me, not asking the sky to come down to my goodwill, scattering it freely forever. The pure contralto sings in the organ loft. The carpenter dresses his plank, the tongue of his foreplane, whistles its wild ascending lisp. The married and unmarried children ride home to their Thanksgiving dinner. The pilot seizes the kingpin, he heaves down with a strong arm. The mate stands braced in the whaleboat, lance and harpoon are ready. The duck shooter walks by silent and cautious stretches. The deacons are ordained with crossed hands at the altar. The spinning girl retreats and advances to the hum of the big wheel. The farmer stops by the bars as he walks on a first-day loaf and looks at the oats and rye. The lunatic is carried at last to the asylum, a confirmed case. He will never sleep any more as he did in the cot in his mother's bedroom. The jour printer, with gray head and gaunt jaws, works at his case. He turns his quid of tobacco while his eyes blur with the manuscript. The malformed limbs are tied to the surgeon's table. What is removed drops horribly in a pail. The quadroon girl is sold at the auction stand. The drunkard nods by the bar-room stove. The machinist rolls up his sleeves. The policeman travels his beat. The gatekeeper marks who pass. The young fellow drives the express wagon. I love him, though I do not know him. The half-breed straps on his light boots to compete in the race. The western turkey shooting draws old and young. Some lean on their rifles, some sit on logs. Out from the crowd steps the marksman, takes his position, levels his piece. The groups of newly come immigrants cover the wharf or levee. As the woolly pates hoe in the sugar field, the overseer views them from his saddle. The bugle calls in the ballroom, the gentlemen run to them. Partners, the dancers bow to each other. The youth lies awake in the cedar-roofed garret and harks to the musical rain. The wolverine sets traps on the creek that helps fill the Huron. The squaw, wrapped in her yellow-hemmed cloth, is offering moccasins and bead bags for sale. The connoisseur peers along the exhibition gallery with half-shut eyes bent sideways. As the deckhands make fast the steamboat, the plank is thrown for the shore-going passengers. The young sister holds out the skein while the elder sister wins it off in a ball, and stops now and then for the knots. The one-year wife is recovering and happy, having a week ago born her first child. The clean-haired Yankee girl works with her sewing machine or in the factory or mill. The paving man leans on his two-handed rammer. The reporter's lead flies swiftly over the notebook. The sign painter is lettering with blue and gold. The canal boy trots on the towpath. The bookkeeper counts at his Desk, the shoemaker waxes his thread. The conductor beats time for the band and all the performers follow. Hymn. The child is baptized. The convert is making his first professions. The regatta is spread on the bay. The race is begun. How the white sails sparkle. The drover, watching his drove, sings out to them that would stray. The peddler sweats, with his pack on his back, the purchaser haggling about the odd cent. The bride unrumpled her white dress. The minute hand of the clock moves slowly. The opium eater reclines, with rigid head and just opened lips. The prostitute draggles her shawl. Her bonnet bobs on her tipsy end. Pimpled neck. The crowd laugh at her blackguard oaths. The men jeer and wink to each other. Miserable. I do not laugh at your oaths, nor jeer you. The president, holding a cabinet council, is surrounded by the great secretaries. On the piazza walk three matrons, stately and friendly with twined arms. The crew of the fish smack pack repeated layers of halibut in the hold. The Missourian crosses the plains toting his wares and his cattle. As the fare collector goes through the train, he gives notice by the jingling of loose change. The floormen are laying the floor. The roofers are tinning the roof. The masons are calling for mortar. In single file, each shouldering his hood, pass onward the laborers. Seasons pursuing each other, the indescribable crowd is gathered. It is the 4th of 7th month. What salutes of cannon and small arms. Seasons pursuing each other, the plow plows, the mower mows, and the winter grain falls in the ground. Off on the lakes the pike fisher watches and waits by the hole in the frozen surface. The stumps stand thick round the clearing. The squatter strikes deep with his axe. Flat boatmen make fast towards dusk near the cottonwood or pecan trees. Coon seekers go through the regions of the Red River or through those drained by Tennessee or through those of the Arkansas. Torches shine in the dark that hangs on the Chattahoochee or Altamaha. Patriarchs sit at supper with sons and grandsons and great-grandsons. Around them, in walls of adobe, in canvas tents, rest hunters and trappers after their day's sport. The city sleeps and the country sleeps. The living sleep for their time. The dead sleep for their time. The old husband sleeps by his wife, and the young husband sleeps by his wife. And these tend inward to me, and I tend outward to them. And such as it is to be of these more or less I am. And of these one and all I weave the song of myself. I am of old and young, of the foolish as much as the wise, regardless of others, ever regardful of others. Maternal as well as paternal, a child as well as a man. Stuffed with the stuff that is coarse, and stuffed with the stuff that is fine. One of the nations of many nations, the smallest the same and the largest the same. A southerner soon as a northerner, a planter nonchalant and hospitable down by the Oconee I live. A Yankee bound my own way ready for trade, my joints the most limber joints on earth, and the sternest joints on earth. A Kentuckian walking the vale of the Elkhorn in my deer skin. Leggings, a Louisianan or Georgian. A boatman over lakes or bays or along coasts, a Hoosier, Badger, Buckite. At home on Canadian snowshoes or up in the bush, or with fishermen. Off Newfoundland. At home in the fleet of iceboats, sailing with the rest and tacking. At home on the hills of Vermont, or in the woods of Maine, or the Texan ranch. Comrade of Californians, comrade of free Northwesterners, loving their big proportions. Comrade of craftsmen and coalmen, comrade of all who shakes hands. And welcome to drink and meat. A learner with the simplest, a teacher of the most thoughtful. A novice beginning yet experience in myriads of seasons. Of every hue and caste am I, of every rank and religion. A farmer, mechanic, artist, gentleman, sailor, Quaker, prisoner, Fancy man, rowdy, lawyer, physician, priest. I resist anything better than my own diversity. Breathe the air, but leave plenty after me. And am not stuck up, and am in my place. The moth and the fish eggs are in their place. The bright suns I see and the dark suns I cannot see are in their place. The palpable is in its place, and the impalpable is in its place. These are really the thoughts of all men, in all ages and lands. They are not original with me. If they are not yours, as much as mine, they are nothing, or next to nothing. If they are not the riddle, and the untying of the riddle, they are nothing. If they are not just as close as they are distant, they are nothing. This is the grass that grows wherever the land is and the water is. This the common air that bathes the globe. With music strong, I come, with my cornets and my drums. I play not marches for accepted victors only, I play marches for conquered and slain persons. Have you heard that it was good to gain the day? I also say it is good to fall. Battles are lost in the same spirit in which they are won. I beat and pound for the dead. I blow through my ambushers my loudest and gayest for them. Vivat to those who have failed, and to those whose war vessels sank in the sea, and to those themselves who sank in the sea, and to all the generals that lost engagements, and all overcome heroes, and the numberless unknown heroes equal to the greatest heroes known. This is the meal equally set, this meat for natural hunger. It is for the wicked just the same as the righteous. I make appointments with all. I will not have a single person slighted or left away. The kept woman, spongert, thief, are hereby invited. The heavy-lipped slave is invited, the venereal is invited. There shall be no difference between them and the rest. This is the press of a bashful hand, this the float and odor of hair. This the touch of my lips to yours, this the murmur of yearning. This the far-off depth and height reflecting my own face. This the thoughtful merge of myself, and the outlet again. Do you guess I have some intricate purpose? Well, I have, for the 4th month showers have, and the mica on the side of a rock has. Do you take it? I would astonish. Does the daylight astonish? Does the early redstart twitter through the woods? Do I astonish more than they? This hour I tell things in confidence. I might not tell everybody, but I will tell you. Who goes there? Hankering, gross, mystical, nude. How is it I extract strength from the beef I eat? What is a man anyhow? What am I? What are you? All I mark as my own you shall offset it with your own. Else it was time lost listening to me. I do not snivel that snivel the world over. That months are vacuums in the ground, but wallow in filth. Whimpering and truckling fold with powders for invalids, conformity. Goes to the 4th removed. I wear my hat as I please indoors or out. Why should I pray? Why should I venerate and be ceremonious? Having period through the strata, analyzed to a hair, counseled with doctors and calculated close. I find no sweeter fat than sticks to my own bones. In all people I see myself, none more, and not one a barley corn less. And the good or bad I say of myself, I say of them. I know I am solid and sound. To me, the converging objects of the universe perpetually flow. All are written to me, and I must get what the writing means. I know I am deathless. I know this orbit of mine cannot be swept by a carpenter's compass. I know I shall not pass like a child's curlicue cut with a burnt stick at night. I know I am August. I do not trouble my spirit to vindicate itself or be understood. I see that the elementary laws never apologize. I reckon I behave no prouder than the level I plant my house by. After all, I exist as I am. That is enough. If no other in the world be aware, I sit content. And if each and all be aware, I sit content. One world is aware, and by far the largest to me, and that is myself. And whether I come to my own today, or in 10,000 or 10,000,000 years, I can cheerfully take it now, or with equal cheerfulness, I can wait. My foothold is tenoned and mortised in granite. I laugh at what you call dissolution, and I know the amplitude of time. I am the poet of the body, and I am the poet of the soul. The pleasures of heaven are with me, and the pains of hell are with me. The first I graft and increase upon myself, the latter I translate into a new tongue. I am the poet of the woman, the same as the man. And I say it is as great to be a woman, to be a man. And I say there is nothing greater than the mother of men. I chant the chant of dilation, or pride. We have had ducking and deprecating about enough. I show that size is only development. Have you outstripped the rest? Are you the president? It is a trifle. They will more than arrive there, everyone, and still pass on. I am he that walks with the tender and growing night. I call to the earth and sea half held by night. Press close, bare-bosomed night. Press close, magnetic, nourishing night. Night of south winds, a night of the large few stars. Still nodding night, mad naked summer night. Smile, though, voluptuous, cool-breathed earth. Earth of the slumbering and liquid trees. Earth of departed sunset, earth of the mountains misty-toked. Earth of the vitreous pour of the full moon, just tinged with blue. Earth of shine and dark, mottling the tide of the river. Earth of the limpid gray of clouds, brighter and clearer for my sake. Far-swooping elbowed earth, rich apple-blossomed earth. Smile, for your lover comes. Prodigal, you have given me love, therefore I to you give love. Oh, unspeakable, passionate love. You see, I resign myself to you also, I guess what you mean. I behold from the beach your crooked fingers. I believe you refuse to go back without feeling of me. We must have a turn together. I undress, hurry me out of sight of the land. Cushion me soft, rock me in a billowy drowse. Dash me with amorous wet, I can repay you. Sea of stretched ground swells. Sea breathing broad and convulsive breaths. Sea of the brine of life and of unshoveled yet always ready graves. Howler and scoop of storms, capricious and dainty sea. I am integral with you, I too am of one phase and of all phases. Partaker of influx and efflux, I, extoller of hate and conciliation. Extoller of armies and those that sleep in each other's arms. I am he attesting sympathy. Shall I make my list of things in the house and skip the house that supports them? I am not the poet of goodness only, I do not decline to be the poet of wickedness also. What blurts is this about virtue and vice? Evil propels me and reform of evil propels me, I stand indifferent. My gate is no fault finder's or rejecter's gate. I moisten the roots of all that has grown. Did you fear some scrofula out of the unflagging pregnancy? Did you guess the celestial laws are yet to be worked over and rectified? I find one side a balance, and the antipodal side a balance. Soft doctrine as steady help as stable doctrine. Thoughts and deeds of the present are rouse and early start. This minute that comes to me over the past decillions. There is no better than it and now. What behaved well in the past or behaves well today is not such. Wonder. The wonder is always how there can be a mean man or an infidel. Endless unfolding of words of ages. And mine a word of the modern, the word en masse. A word of the faith that never balks. Here or henceforward it is all the same to me, I accept time absolutely. It alone is without flaw, it alone rounds and completes all. That mystic baffling wonder alone completes all. I accept reality and dare not question it. Materialism first and last imbuing. Proper, positive science. Long life, exact demonstration. Fetch stone crop mixture with cedar and branches of lilac. This is the lexicographer, this the chemist, this made a grammar of. The old cartouches. These mariners put the ship through dangerous unknown seas. This is the geologist, this works with the scalper, and this is 8. Mathematician. Gentlemen, to you the first honors always. Your facts are useful, and yet they are not my dwelling. I but enter by them to an area of my dwelling. Less the reminders of properties told my words, and more the reminders they of life untold, and of freedom and extrication. And make short account of neuters and geldings, and favor men and women fully equipped, and beat the gong of revolt, and stop with fugitives and them that plot and conspire. Walt Whitman, a cosmos, of Manhattan the sun. Turbulent, fleshy, sensual, eating, drinking, and breeding. No sentimental, no stander above men and women or apart from them. No more modest than immodest. Unscrew the locks from the doors. Unscrew the doors themselves from their jambs. Whoever degrades, another degrades me. And whatever is done or said returns at last to me. Through me, the afflate is surging, and surging through me the current and index. I speak the password primeval, I give the sign of democracy. By God, I will accept nothing which all cannot have, they are counterparted on the same terms. Through me many long dumb voices. Voices of the interminable generations of prisoners and slaves. Voices of the diseased and despairing and of thieves and dwarfs. Voices of cycles of preparation and accretion, and of the threads that connect the stars, and of wombs and of the father stuff, and of the rights of them, the others are down upon, of the deformed, trivial, flat, foolish, despised. Fog in the air, beetles rolling balls of dung. Through me, forbidden voices. Voices of sexes and lust's voice veiled, and I remove the veil. Voices indecent by me clarified and transfigured. I do not press my fingers across my mouth. I keep as delicate around the bowels as around the head and heart. Population is no more rank to me than death is. I believe in the flesh and the appetites. Seeing, hearing, feeling are miracles, and each part and tag of me is a miracle. Divine am I inside and out, and I make holy whatever I touch or am touched from. The scent of these armpits aromas finer than prayer. This head more than churches, Bibles, and all the creeds. If I worship one thing more than another, it shall be the spread of my own body, or any part of it. The translucent mold of me, it shall be you. Shaded ledges and rests, it shall be you. Firm masculine calter, it shall be you. Whatever goes to the tilth of me, it shall be you. My rich blood, your milky stream, pale strippings of my life. Breast that presses against other breasts, it shall be you. My brain, it shall be your occult convolutions. The root of washed sweet flag, timorous pond snipe, nest of guarded duplicate eggs, it shall be you. Mixed tussled hay of head, beard, brawn, it shall be you. Trickling sap of maple, the fiber of manly wheat, it shall be you. Sun so generous, it shall be you. Vapors lighting and shading my face, it shall be you. You sweaty brooks and dews, it shall be you. Winds whose soft tickling genitals rub against me, it shall be you. Broad muscular fields, branches of live oak, loving lounger in my winding path, it shall be you. Hands I have taken, a face I have kissed, mortal I have ever touched, it shall be you. I dote on myself, there is a lot of me, and also luscious. Each moment, and whatever happens, thrills me with joy. I cannot tell how my ankles bend, nor whence the cause of my faintest wish, nor the cause of the friendship I emit, nor the cause of the friendship I take again. That I walk up to my stoop, I pause to consider if it really is. The morning glory at my window satisfies me more than the metaphysics of books. To behold the day break, the little light fades the immense and diaphanous shadows. The air tastes good to my palate. Texts of the moving world at innocent gambols silently rising, freshly exuding, shooting obliquely high and low. Something I cannot see puts upward libidinous prongs. Seas of bright juice suffuse heaven. The earth by the sky stayed with the daily close of their junction. The heaped challenge from the east that moment over my head. The mocking taunt, see then whether you shall be master. Dazzling and tremendous, how quick the sunrise would kill me. If I could not now and always send sunrise out of me. We also ascend dazzling and tremendous as the sun. We found our own, oh my soul, in the calm and cool at daybreak. My voice goes after what my eyes cannot reach. With the twirl of my tongue, I encompass worlds and volumes of worlds. Each is the twin of my vision. It is unequal to measure itself. It provokes me forever. It says sarcastically, Walt, you contain enough. Why don't you let it out then? Come now, I will not be tantalized. You conceive too much of articulation. Do you not know, O speech, how the buds beneath you are folded, waiting in gloom, protected by frost, the dirt receding before my prophetical screams, my underlying causes to balance them at last, my knowledge, my live parts, it keeping tally with the meaning of all things, happiness, which whoever hears me let him or her set out in search of this day. My final merit, I refuse you. I refuse to put from me what I really am. Encompass worlds, but never try to encompass me. I crowd your slimmest and best by simply looking toward you. Writing and talk do not prove me. I carry the plenum of proof and everything else in my face. With the hush of my lips, I wholly confound the skeptics. Now I will do nothing but listen. To accrue what I hear into this song, to let sounds contribute toward it. I hear bravuras of birds, the bustle of growing wheat, gossip of flames, the clack of sticks, cooking my meals. I hear the sound I love, the sound of the human voice. I hear all sounds running together, combined, fused, or following. Sounds of the city and sounds out of the city, sounds of the day and night. Talkative young ones to those that like them, the loud laugh of work people at their meals, the angry bass of disjointed friendship, the faint tones of the sick, the judge with hands tight to the desk, his pallid lips pronouncing a death sentence, the he-yo of stevedores unloading ships by the wharves, the refrain of the anchor lifters, the ring of alarm bells, the cry of fire, the whir of swift streaking engines and hose carts with premonitory tinkles and colored lights, the steam whistle, the solid roll of the train of approaching cars, the slow march played at the head of the association marching two and two. They go to guard some corpse. The flag tops are draped with black muslin. I hear the violoncello is the young man's heart's complaint. I hear the keyed cornet. It glides quickly through my ears. It shakes mad sweet pangs through my belly and breast. I hear the chorus. It is a grand opera. Ah, this is indeed music. This suits me. A tenor, large and fresh as the creation fills me. The orbit flex of his mouth is pouring and filling me full. I hear the trained soprano. What work with hers is this? The orchestra whirls me wider than Uranus flies. It wrenches such ardors from me I did not know I possessed them. It sails me. I dab with bare feet. They are licked by the indolent waves. I am cut by bitter and angry hail. I lose my breath. Steeped amid honeyed morphine, my windpipe throttled in fakes of death. At length, let up again to feel the puzzle of puzzles. And that we call being. To be in any form, what is that? Round and round we go, all of us, and ever come back thither. If nothing lay more developed, the quahawk in its callous shell was enough. Mine is no callous shell. I have instant conductors all over me whether I pass or stop. They seize every object and lead it harmlessly through me. I merely stir, press, feel with my fingers, and am happy. To touch my person to someone else's is about as much as I can stand. Is this, then, a touch? delivering me to a new identity. Flames and ether making a rush for my veins. Treacherous tip of me reaching and crowding to help them. My flesh and blood playing out lightning to strike what is hardly different from myself. On all sides prurient provokers stiffening my limbs. Straining the udder of my heart for its withheld drip. Behaving licentious toward me, taking no denial. Depriving me of my best as for a purpose. Unbuttoning my clothes, holding me by the bare waist. Diluting my confusion with the calm of the sunlight and pasture fields. Immodestly sliding the fellow senses away. They bribed to swap off with touch and go and graze at the edges of me. No consideration, no regard for my draining strength or my anger. Fetching the rest of the herd around to enjoy them a while. Then all uniting to stand on a headland and worry me. The centuries desert every other part of me. They have left me helpless to a red marauder. They all come to the headland to witness and assist against me. I am given up by traitors. I talk wildly. I have lost my wits. I and nobody else is the greatest traitor. I went myself first to the headland. My own hands carried me there. You villain, touch. What are you doing? My breath is tight in its throat. Unclench your floodgates. You are too much for me. Blind loving wrestling touch, sheath-hooded sharp-toothed touch. Did it make you ache, so, leaving me? Parting tracked by arriving, perpetual payment of a perpetual loan. Rich showering rain, and recompense richer afterward. Crowds take and accumulate, stand by the curb prolific and vital. Landscapes projected masculine, full-sized and golden. All truths wait in all things. They neither hasten their own delivery nor resist it. They do not need the obstetric forceps of the surgeon. The insignificant is as big to me as any. What is less or more than a touch? Logic and sermons never convince. The damp of the night drives deeper into my soul. Only what proves itself to every man and woman is so. Only what nobody denies is so. A minute and a drop of me settle my brain. I believe the soggy clods shall become lovers and lamps. And a compend of compends is the meat of a man or woman. And a summit in flower there is the feeling they have for each other. And they are to branch boundlessly out of that lesson until it becomes omnificent. And until one and all shall delight us, and we delight them. I believe a leaf of grass is no less than the journey work of the stars. And the pismire is equally perfect, and a grain of sand, and the egg of the wren. And the tree-toad is a chef d'oeuvre for the highest. And the running blackberry would adorn the parlors of heaven. And the narrowest hinge in my hand puts to scorn all machinery. And the cow crunching with depressed head surpasses any statue. And a mouse is miracle enough to stagger sextillions of infidels. I find I incorporate nice, cold, long-threaded moss, roots, grains, esculent roots, and am stuccoed with quadrupeds and birds all over, and have distanced what is behind me for good reasons, but call anything back again when I desire it. In vain the speeding or shyness. In vain the plutonic rocks send their old heat against my approach. In vain the mastodon retreats beneath its own powdered bones. In vain objects stand leagues off and assume manifold shapes. In vain the ocean settling in hollows and the great monsters lying low. In vain the buzzard houses herself with the sky. In vain the snake slides through the creepers and logs. In vain the elk takes to the inner passes of the woods. In vain the razor-billed auk sails far north to Labrador. I follow quickly. I ascend to the nest in the fissure of the cliff. I think I could turn and live with animals. They are so placid and self-contained. I stand and look at them long and long. They do not sweat and whine about their condition. They do not lie awake in the dark and weep for their sins. They do not make me sick discussing their duty to God. Not one is dissatisfied, not one is demented with the mania of owning things. Not one kneels to another, nor to his kind that lived thousands of years ago. Not one is respectable or unhappy over the whole earth. So they show their relations to me, and I accept them. They bring me tokens of myself. They evince them plainly in their possession. I wonder where they get those tokens. Did I pass that way huge times ago and negligently drop them? Myself moving forward then and now and forever. Gathering and showing more, always and with velocity. Infinite and omnigenous, and the like of these among them. Not too exclusive, toward the reaches of my remembrances. Picking out here one that I love, and now go with him on brotherly terms. A gigantic beauty of a stallion, fresh and responsive to my caresses. Head high in the forehead, wide between the ears. Limbs glossy and supple, tail dusting the ground. Eyes full of sparkling wickedness, ears finely cut, flexibly moving. His nostrils dilate as my heels embrace him. His well-built limbs tremble with pleasure as we race around and return. I but use you a minute, then I resign you, stallion. Why do I need your paces when I outgallop them? Even as I stand or sit passing faster than you. Space and time. Now I see it is true, what I guessed at. What I thought when I loafed on the grass. What I guessed while I lay alone in my bed. And again as I walked the beach under the paling stars of the morning. My ties and ballasts leave me, my elbows rest in sea gaps. I skirt sierras, my palms cover continents. I am afoot with my vision. By the city's quadrangular houses, in log huts, camping with lumbermen. Along the ruts of the turnpike, along the dry gulch and rivulet bed. Weeding my onion patch or hosing rows of carrots and parsnips. Crossing savannas, trailing in forests. Prospecting, gold digging, girdling the trees of a new purchase. Torched ankle deep by the hot sand, hauling my boat down the shallow river, where the panther walks to and fro on a limb overhead, where the buck turns furiously at the hunter, where the rattlesnake suns his flabby length on a rock, where the otter is feeding on fish, where the alligator in his tough pimples sleeps by the bayou, where the black bear is searching for roots or honey, where the beaver packs the mud with his paddle shaked tall. Over the growing sugar, over the yellow-flowered cotton plant, over the rice in its low moist field, over the sharp-peaked farmhouse with its scalloped scum and slender shoots from the gutters, over the western persimmon, over the long-leaf corn, over the delicate blue flower flax, over the white and brown buckwheat, the hummer and buzzer therewith, the rest, over the dusky green of the rye as it ripples and shaves in the breeze. Scaling mountains, pulling myself cautiously up, holding on by low, cragged limbs. Walking the path worn in the grass and beat through the leaves of the brush, where the quail is whistling betwixt the woods and the wheat lot, where the bat flies in the 7th month eve, where the great gold bug drops through the dark, where the brook puts out of the roots of the old tree and flows to the meadow, where cattle stand and shake away flies with the tremulous shuddering of their hides, where the cheesecloth hangs in the kitchen, where andirons straddle the hearth slab, where cobwebs fall in festoons from the rafters, where trip hammers crash, where the press is whirling its cylinders, wherever the human heart beats with terrible throes under its ribs, where the pear-shaped balloon is floating aloft, floating in it, myself, and looking composedly down, where the life car is drawn on the slip noose, where the heat hatches pale green eggs in the dented sand, where the she-whale swims with her calf and never forsakes it, where the steamship trails hind ways its long pennant of smoke, where the fin of the shark cuts like a black chip out of the water, where the half-burned brig is riding on unknown currents, where shells grow to her slimy deck, where the dead are corrupting. Below, where the dense starred flag is borne at the head of the regiments. Approaching Manhattan up by the long-stretching island. Under Niagara, the cataract falling like a veil over my countenance. Upon a doorstep, upon the horse block of hardwood outside, upon the race course, or enjoying picnics, or jigs, or a good game of baseball. At heath festivals, with blackguard jibes, ironical license. Bull dances, drinking, laughter. At the cider mill, tasting the sweets of the brown mash, sucking the juice through a straw. At apple peelings wanting kisses for all the red fruit I find. At musters, beach parties, friendly bees, huskings, house raisings. Where the mockingbird sounds his delicious gurgles, cackles, screams, weeps. Where the hayrick stands in the barnyard, where the dry stalks are scattered, where the brood cow waits in the hovel. Where the bull advances to do his masculine work, where the stud too. The mare, where the cock is treading the hen. Where the heifers browse, where geese nip their food with short jerks. Where sundown shadows lengthen over the limitless and lonesome prairie. Where herds of buffalo make a crawling spread of the square miles, far and near. Where the hummingbird shimmers, where the neck of the long-lived swan is curving and winding. Where the laughing gull scoops by the shore, where she laughs her near human laugh. Where beehives range on a gray bench in the garden half hid by the high weeds. Where band-necked partridges roost in a ring on the ground with their heads out. Where burial coaches enter the arched gates of a cemetery. Where winter wolves bark amid wastes of snow and icicle trees. Where the yellow-crowned heron comes to the edge of the marsh at night and feeds upon small crabs. Where the splash of swimmers and divers cools the warm noon. Where the katydid works her chromatic reed on the walnut tree over the well. Through patches of citrons and cucumbers with silver-wired leaves. Through the salt lick or orange glade or under conical firs. Through the gymnasium, through the curtained saloon, through the office or public hall. Pleased with the native and pleased with the foreign, pleased with the new and old. Pleased with the homely woman as well as the handsome. Pleased with the Quakeress as she puts off her bonnet and talks melodiously. Pleased with the tune of the choir of the whitewashed church. Pleased with the earnest words of the sweating Methodist preacher. Impressed, seriously, at the camp meeting. Looking in at the shop windows of Broadway the whole forenoon. Flatting the flesh of my nose on the thick plate glass. Wandering the same afternoon with my face turned up to the clouds. Or down a lane or along the beach. My right and left arms round the sides of two friends, and I am the middle. Coming home with the silent and dark-cheeked bush boy behind me. He rides at the rate of the day, far from the settlements, studying the print of animals' feet, or the moccasin print. By the cot in the hospital reaching lemonade to a feverish patient. Nigh the coffined corpse, when all is still, examining with a candle. Voyaging to every port to dicker and adventure. Hurrying with the modern crowd, as eager and fickle as any. Hot toward one I hate, ready in my madness to knife him. Solitary at midnight, in my backyard, my thoughts have gone from me a long while. Walking the old hills of Judea with the beautiful gentle God by my side. Speeding through space, speeding through heaven and the stars. Speeding amid the 7 satellites and the broad ring and the diameter of 80,000 miles. Speeding with tailed meteors, throwing fireballs like the rest. Carrying the crescent child that carries its own full mother in its belly. Storming, enjoying, planning, loving, cautioning. Backing and filling, appearing and disappearing. I tread day and night such roads. I visit the orchards of spheres and look at the product. And look at quintillions ripened and look at quintillions green. I fly those flights of a fluid and swallowing soul. My course runs below the soundings of plummets. I help myself to material and immaterial. No guard can shut me off, no law prevents me. I anchor my ship for a little while only. My messengers continually cruise away or bring their returns to me. I go hunting polar furs and the seal, leaping chasms with 8 pike-pointed staff, clinging to topples of brittle and blue. I ascend to the foretruck. I take my place late at night in the crow's nest. We sail the Arctic Sea, it is plenty light enough. Through the clear atmosphere, I stretch around on the wonderful beauty. The enormous masses of ice pass me, and I pass them. The scenery is plain in all directions. The white-topped mountains show in the distance. I fling out my fancies toward them. We are approaching some great battlefield in which we are soon to be engaged. We pass the colossal outposts of the encampment. We pass with still feet and caution, for we are entering by the suburbs some vast and ruined city. The blocks and fallen architecture more than all the living cities of the globe. I am a free companion. I bivouac by invading watchfires. I turn the bridegroom out of bed and stay with the bride myself. I tighten her all night to my thighs and lips. My voice is the wife's voice, the screech by the rail of the stairs. They fetch my man's body up dripping and drowned. I understand the large hearts of heroes, the courage of present times and all times. How the skipper saw the crowded and rudderless wreck of the steamship, and death chasing it up and down the storm. How he knuckled tight and gave not back an inch, and was faithful of days and faithful of nights. And chalked in large letters on a board, "Be of good cheer, we will not desert you." How he followed with them and tacked with them 3 days and would not give it up. How he saved the drifting company at last. How the lank loose-gowned women looked when boated from the side of their prepared graves. How the silent old-faced infants and the lifted sick and the sharp-lipped unshaved men. All this I swallow. It tastes good. I like it very much. It becomes mine. I am the man. I suffered. I was there. The disdain and calmness of martyrs. The mother of old, condemned for a witch, burnt with dry wood, her children gazing on. The hounded slave that flags in the race leans by the fence, glowing, covered with sweat. The twinges that sting like needles his legs and neck, the murderous buckshot and the bullets. All these I feel, or am. I am the hounded slave. I wince at the bite of the dogs. Hell and despair are upon me. Crack and again crack the marksman.
This video is brought to you by The Vine on YouTube and by The Storyteller on Facebook. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, please like, subscribe, share, leave comments, give us feedback. This video is brought to you by The Vine on YouTube and by The Storyteller on Facebook.
By Walt Whitman. 1819 to 1892. By Blue, Ontario shore. As I mused of these warlike days, and peace returned, and the dead that return no more, a phantom gigantic superb, with stern visage, accosted me. Chant me the poem, it said, that comes from the soul of America. Chant me the carol of victory, and strike up the marches of Libertad, marches more powerful yet. And sing me before you go the song of the throes of democracy. Democracy, the destined conqueror, yet treacherous lip smiles everywhere. And death and infidelity at every step. A nation announcing itself. I make the only growth by which I can be appreciated. I reject none, accept all, then reproduce all in my forms. A breed whose proof is in time and deeds. What we are, the nativity is answered enough to objections. We wield ourselves as a weapon is wielded. We are powerful and tremendous in ourselves. We are executive in ourselves. We are sufficient in the variety of ourselves. We are the most beautiful to ourselves and in ourselves. We stand self-poised in the middle, branching thence all over the world. From Missouri, Nebraska, or Kansas, laughing attacks to scorn. Nothing is sinful to us outside of ourselves. Whatever appears, whatever does not appear, we are beautiful or sinful in ourselves only. O mother, O sisters dear, if we are lost, no victor else has destroyed us. It is by ourselves we go down to eternal night. Have you thought there could be but a single supreme? There can be any number of supremes. One does not countervail another any more than one eyesight countervails another, or one life countervails another. All are eligible to all. All is for individuals, all is for you. No condition is prohibited, not God's or any. All comes by the body, only health puts you rapport with the universe. Produce great persons, the rest follows. Piety and conformity to them that like. Peace, obesity, allegiance to them that like. I am he who tauntingly compels men, women, nations. Crying, leap from your seats and contend for your lives. I am he who walks the states with a barbed tongue, questioning every one I meet. Who are you that wanted only to be told what you knew before? Who are you that wanted only a book to join you in your nonsense? With pangs and cries, as thine own, O bearer of many children. These clamors wild to a race of pride I give. O lands, would you be freer than all that has ever been before? If you would be freer than all that has been before, come listen to me. Fear grace, elegance, civilization, delicatessen. Hear the mellow sweet, the sucking of honey juice. Beware the advancing mortal ripening of nature. Beware what precedes the decay of the ruggedness of states and men. Ages, precedents, have long been accumulating undirected materials. America brings builders and brings its styles. The immortal poets of Asia and Europe have done their work and passed to other spheres. A work remains, the work of surpassing all they have done. America, curious toward foreign characters, stands by its own at all hazards. Stands removed, spacious, composite, sound, initiates the true use of precedents. Does not repel them, or the past, or what they have produced under their forms. Takes the lesson with calmness, perceives the corpse slowly born from the house. Perceives that it waits a little while in the door, that it was fittest for its days. That its life has descended to the stalwart and well-shaped heir who approaches, and that he shall be fittest for his days. Any period, one nation must lead. One land must be the promise and reliance of the future. These states are the amplest poem. Here is not merely a nation, but a teeming nation of nations. Here the doings of men correspond with the broadcast doings of the day and night. Here is what moves in magnificent masses, careless of particulars. Here are the roughs, beards, friendliness, combativeness, the soul loves. Here the flowing trains, here the crowds, equality, diversity, the soul loves. Land of lands and bards to corroborate. Of them standing among them, one lifts to the light a west-bred face. To him, the hereditary countenance bequeathed both mothers and fathers. His first parts substances, earth, water, animals, trees. Built of the common stock, having room for far and near. Used to dispense with other lands, incarnating this land. Attracting it body and soul to himself, hanging on its neck with incomparable love. Plunging his seminal muscle into its merits and demerits. Making its cities, beginnings, events, diversities, wars, vocal in him. Making its rivers, lakes, bays, embouchure in him. Mississippi with yearly freshets and changing shoots, Columbia, Niagara, Hudson, spending themselves lovingly in him. If the Atlantic coast stretch or the Pacific coast stretch, he stretching with them north or south. Spanning between them east and west, and touching whatever is between them. Growths growing from him to offset the growth of pine, cedar, hemlock, live oak, locust, chestnuts, hickory, cottonwood, orange, magnolia. Tangles as tangled in him as any canebrake or swamp. He likening sides and peaks of mountains, forests coated with northern transparent ice. Off him pasturage sweet and natural as savanna, upland, prairie. Through him lights, whirls, streams, answering those of the fish hawk, mockingbird, night heron, and eagle. His spirit surrounding his country's spirit, unclosed to good and evil. Surrounding the essences of real things, old times and present times. Surrounding just found shores, islands, tribes of red aborigines. Weather-beaten vessels, landings, settlements, embryo stature, and muscle. The haughty defiance of the year, one, war, peace, the formation of the Constitution. The separate states, the simple elastic scheme, the immigrants. The Union always swarming with laborers and always sure and impregnable. The unsurveyed interior, log houses, clearings, wild animals. Hunters, trappers. Surrounding the multiform agriculture, mines, temperature. The gestation of new states. Congress convening every 12th month, the members duly coming up from the uttermost parts. Surrounding the noble character of mechanics and farmers, especially. The young men. Responding to their manners, speech, dress, friendships, the gait they have of persons who never knew how it felt to stand in the presence of superiors. The freshness and candor of their physiognomy, the copiousness and the decision of their phrenology. The picturesque looseness of their carriage, their fierceness when wronged, the fluency of their speech, their delight in music, their curiosity, good temper and open-handedness, the whole composite make. The prevailing ardor and enterprise, the large amativeness, the perfect equality of the female with the male, the fluid movement of the population, the superior marine, free commerce, fisheries, whaling, gold digging, wharf-hemmed cities, railroad, and steamboat lines intersecting all points, factories, mercantile life, labor-saving machinery, the Northeast, Northwest, Southwest, Manhattan firemen, the Yankee swab, Southern plantation life, slavery the murderous, treacherous conspiracy to raise it upon the ruins of all the rest, on and on to grapple with it assassin. Then your life for ours be the stake, and respite no more. Lo, high toward heaven, this day, Libertad, from the conqueror's field return, D. I mark the new aureola around your head. No more of soft astral, but dazzling and fierce, with war's flames and the lambent lightning playing, and your port immovable where you stand, with still the inextinguishable glance and the clenched and lifted fist, and your foot on the neck of the menacing one, the scorner utterly crushed beneath you, the menacing arrogant one that strode and advanced with his senseless scorn, bearing the murderous knife, the wide-swelling one, the braggart that would yesterday do so much, today carrion dead and damned, the despised of all the earth, an awful rank to the dunghill maggots, burned. Others take finish, but the Republic is ever constructive and ever keeps vista. Others adorn the past, but you, O days of the present, I adore you. O days of the future, I believe in you. I isolate myself for your sake. O America, because you build for mankind, I build for you. O well-beloved stone-cutters, I lead them who plan with decision and science. Lead the present with a friendly hand toward the future. Bravos to all impulses sending sane children to the next age. But damn that which spends itself with no thought of the stain. Pain, dismay, feebleness, it is bequeathing. I listened to the Phantom by Ontario's shore. I heard the voice arising demanding bards. By them, all native and grand, by them alone can these states be fused into the compact organism of a nation. To hold men together by paper and seal or by compulsion is no account. That only holds men together which aggregates all in a living principle, as the hold of the limbs of the body or the fibers of plants. Of all races and eras these states with veins full of poetical stuff most need poets, and are to have the greatest, and use them the greatest. Their presidents shall not be their common referee so much as their poets shall. Soul of love and tongue of fire, eye to pierce the deepest deeps and sweep the world. A mother, prolific and full in all besides, yet how long barren, barren. Of these states, the poet is the equable man. Not in him, but off from him things are grotesque, eccentric, fail of their full returns. Nothing out of its place is good, nothing in its place is bad. He bestows on every object or quality its fit proportion, neither more nor less. He is the arbiter of the diverse, he is the key. He is the equalizer of his age and land. He supplies what wants supplying, he checks what wants checking. In peace out of him speaks the spirit of peace, large, rich, thrifty, building populous towns, encouraging agriculture, arts, commerce, lighting the study of man, the soul, health, immortality, government. In war he is the best backer of the war, he fetches artillery as good as the engineers, he can make every word he speaks draw blood. The years straying toward infidelity he withholds by his steady faith. He is no arguer, he is judgment, nature accepts him absolutely. He judges not as the judge judges, but as the sun falling round. Helpless thing. As he sees the farthest, he has the most faith. His thoughts are the hymns of praise of things. In the dispute on God and eternity, he is silent. He sees eternity less like a play with a prologue and denouement. He sees eternity in men and women. He does not see men and women as dreams or dots. For the great idea, the idea of perfect and free individuals. For that, the bard walks in advance, leader of leaders. The attitude of him cheers up slaves and horrifies foreign despots. Without extinction is liberty, without retrograde is equality. They live in the feelings of young men and the best women. Not for nothing have the indomitable heads of the earth been always ready to fall for liberty. For the great idea. That, oh my brethren, that is the mission of poets. Songs of stern defiance, ever ready. Songs of the rapid arming and the march. The flag of peace quick folded, and instead of the flag we know. Warlike flag of the great idea. Angry claw, I saw there leaping. I stand again, in leaden rain your flapping fold saluting. I sing you over all, flying beckoning, through the fight the hard contested fight. The cannons open their rosy flashing muzzles, the hurtled balls scream. The battlefront forms, amid the smoke the volleys pour incessant. From the line. Hark, the ringing word charge, dash now the tussle and the furious. Maddening yells. Now the corpses tumble curled upon the ground. Cold, cold in death, for the precious life of you. The angry claw, I saw there leaping. Are you he who would assume a place to teach or be a poet here in the States? The place is august, the terms obdurate. Who would assume to teach here may well prepare himself body and mind. He may well survey, ponder, arm, fortify, harden, make lithe himself. He shall surely be questioned beforehand by me with many and stern questions. Who are you indeed, who would talk or sing to America? Have you studied out the land, its idioms, and men? Have you learned the physiology, phrenology, politics, geography? Pride, freedom, the friendship of the land, its substratum and objects. Have you considered the organic compact of the first day of the first year of independence, signed by the commissioners, ratified by the states, and read by Washington at the head of the army? Have you possessed yourself of the federal Constitution? Do you see who has left all feudal processes and poems behind them, and assumed the poems and processes of democracy? Are you faithful to things? Do you teach what the land and sea, the bodies of men, womanhood, amativeness, heroic anger, teach? Have you spent through fleeting customs, popularities? Can you hold your hand against all temptations, follies, whirls, fears, contentions? Are you very strong? Are you really of the whole people? Are you not of some coterie, some school, or mere religion? Are you done with reviews and criticisms of life, animating now to life itself? Have you vivified yourself from the maternity of these states? Have you too the old ever-fresh forbearance and impartiality? Do you hold the like love for those hardening to maturity, for the last-born, little and big, and for the errant? What is this you bring my America? Is it a uniform in my country? Is it not something that has been better told or done before? Have you not imported this, or the spirit of it in some ship? Is it not a mere tale, a rhyme, a prettiness, dashes the good old cause in it? Has it not dangled long at the heels of the poets, politicians, literates of enemies' lands? Does it not assume that what is notoriously gone is still here? Does it answer universal needs? Will it improve manners? Does it sound with trumpet voice the proud victory of the Union in that secession war? Can your performance face the open fields and the seaside? Will it absorb into me as I absorb food, air, to appear again in my strength, gait, face? Have real employments contributed to it? Original makers, not mere amanuenses. Does it meet modern discoveries, calibers, facts, face to face? What does it mean to American persons, progresses, cities? Chicago. Canada, Arkansas. Does it see behind the apparent custodians the real custodians standing, menacing, silent, the mechanics, Manhattans, Western men, Southerners, significant alike in their apathy and the promptness of their love? Does it see what finally befalls, and has always finally befallen? Each temporizer, patriot, outsider, partialist, alarmist, infidel, who has ever asked anything of America? What mocking and scornful negligence! The track strewed with the dust of skeletons. By the roadside others disdainfully tossed. Rhymes and rhymers pass away, poems distilled from poems pass away. The swarms of reflectors and the polite pass, and leave ashes. Admirers, importers, obedient persons, make but the soil of literature. America justifies itself. Give it time, no disguise can deceive it, or conceal from it, it is impassive enough. Only toward the likes of itself will it advance to meet them. If its poets appear, it will in due time advance to meet them. There is no fear of mistake. The proof of a poet shall be sternly deferred till his country absorbs him as affectionately as he has absorbed it. He masters whose spirit masters, he tastes sweetest who results sweetest in the long run. The blood of the brawn beloved of time is unconstrained. In the need of songs, philosophy, and appropriate native grand opera, shipcraft, any craft, he or she is greatest who contributes the greatest original. Practical example. Already a nonchalant breed, silently emerging, appears on the streets. People's lips salute only doers, lovers, satisfiers, positive knowers. There will shortly be no more priests. I say their work is done. Death is without emergencies here, but life is perpetual emergencies here. Are your body, days, manners, superb? After death, you shall be superb. Justice, health, self-esteem, clear the way with irresistible power. How dare you place anything before a man? All behind me states. A man before all myself, typical, before all. Give me the pain I have served for. Give me to sing the songs of the great idea, take all the rest. I have loved the earth, sun, animals, I have despised riches. I have given aims to everyone that asked, stood up for the stupid and crazy, devoted my income and labor to others. Hated tyrants, argue not concerning God, had patience and indulgence toward the people, taking off my hat to nothing known or unknown. Gone freely with powerful uneducated persons, and with the young, and with the mothers of families. Read these leaves to me in the open air, tried them by trees, stars, rivers. Dismiss whatever insulted my soul or defiled my body. Claim nothing to myself which I have not carefully claimed for others on the same terms. Fed to the camps, and comrades found and accepted from every state. Upon this breast has many a dying soldier learned to breathe his last. This arm, this hand, this voice have nourished, raised, restored to life, recalling many a prostrate form. I am willing to wait to be understood by the growth of the taste of myself, rejecting none, permitting all. Say, O Mother, have I not to your thought been faithful? Have I not through life kept you and yours before me? I swear I begin to see the meaning of these things. It is not the earth, it is not America who is so great. It is I who am great, or to be great. It is you up there, or anyone. It is to walk rapidly through civilizations, governments, theories, through poems, pageants, shows, to form individuals. Underneath all, individuals. I swear nothing is good to me now that ignores individuals. The American compact is altogether with individuals. The only government is that which makes a minute of individuals. The whole theory of the universe is directed unerringly to one single individual, namely to you, Mother, with subtle sense severe, with the naked sword in your hand. I saw you at last refuse to treat but directly with individuals. Underneath all, nativity. I swear I will stand by my nativity, pious or impious, so be it. I swear I am charmed with nothing except nativity. Men, women, cities, nations are only beautiful from the nativity. Underneath all is an expression of love for men and women. I swear I have seen enough of mean and impotent modes of expressing love for men and women. After this day I take my modes of expressing love for men and women in myself. I swear I will have each quality of my race in myself. Talk as you like, he only suits these states whose manners favor the audacity and sublime turbulence of the states. Underneath the lessons of things, spirits, nature, governments, ownerships, I swear I perceive other lessons. Underneath all to me is myself, to you, the same. Monotonous, old song. Oh, I see flashing that this America is only you and me. Its power, weapons, testimony, are you and me. Its crimes, lies, thefts, defections, are you and me. Its Congress is you and me, the officers, capitals, armies, ships, are you and me. Its endless gestations of new states are you and me. The war, that war so bloody and grim, the war I will henceforth forget, was you and me. Natural and artificial are you and me. Freedom, language, poems, employments, are you and me. Past, present, future, are you and me. I dare not shirk any part of myself. Not any part of America, good or bad. Not to build for that which builds for mankind. Not to balance ranks, complexions, creeds, and the sexes. Not to justify science, nor the march of equality. Nor to feed the arrogant blood of the brawn beloved of time. I am for those that have never been mastered. For men and women whose tempers have never been mastered. For those whom laws, theories, conventions can never master. I am for those who walk abreast with the whole earth. Who inaugurate one to inaugurate all. I will not be outfaced by irrational things. I will penetrate what it is in them that is sarcastic upon me. I will make cities and civilizations defer to me. This is what I have learned from America. It is the amount, and I teach it again. Democracy, while weapons were everywhere aimed at your breast. I saw you serenely give birth to immortal children, saw in dreams your dilating form. Saw you with spreading mantle, covering the world. I will confront these shows of the day and night. I will know if I am to be less than they. I will see if I am not as majestic as they. I will see if I am not as subtle and real as they. I will see if I am to be less generous than they. I will see if I have no meaning, while the houses and ships have meaning. I will see if the fishes and birds are to be enough for themselves. And I am not to be enough for myself. I match my spirit against yours, you orbs, growth, mountains, fruits. Copious as you are, I absorb you all in myself, and become the master myself. America isolated yet embodying all, what is it finally except me? These states, what are they except myself? I know now why the earth is gross, tantalizing, wicked, it is for my sake. I take you especially to be mine, you terrible, rude forms. Mother, bend down, bend close to me your face. I know not what these plots and wars and deferments are for. I know not fruition's success, but I know that through war and crime your work goes on, and must yet go on. Thus by blue Ontario's shore, while the winds fanned me and the waves came trooping toward me, I thrilled with the power's pulsations, and the charm of my theme was upon me, till the tissues that held me parted their ties upon me, and I saw the free souls of poets. The loftiest bards of past ages strode before me. Strange large men, long unwaked, undisclosed, were disclosed to me. O my rapt verse, my call, mock me not. Not for the bards of the past, not to invoke them have I launched you forth. Not to call even those lofty bards here, by Ontario's shores, have I sung so capricious and loud my savage song. Bards for my land only I invoke. For the war is over, the field is cleared. Till they strike up marches, henceforth triumphant and onward. To cheer, O mother, your boundless expectant soul. Bards of the great idea. Bards of the peaceful inventions. For the war is over. Yet bards of latent armies, a million soldiers waiting ever ready. Bards with songs, as from burning coals, or the lightning's forked stripes. Ample Ohio's, Canada's, bards of California. Inland, bards. Bards of the war. You by my charm, I invoke.
This video is brought to you by The Vine on YouTube and by The Storyteller on Facebook. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, please like, subscribe, share, leave comments. We love feedback. This video is brought to you by The Vine on YouTube and by The Storyteller on Facebook.
In 1856, not long after the publication of the second edition of Leaves of Grass, Walt Whitman began planning the third edition. By June 1857, in an explosion of poetic production, he wrote about 68 new poems and was seeking a publisher to bring out a new edition of Leaves of Grass. During the next 2 years, Whitman failed to locate a publisher. Yet he did ask the Rome brothers to typeset and print page proofs of the new poems. As he revised, Whitman liked to see printed versions of the poems and think about readers looking at the printed page. In February 1860, Whitman received an unexpected letter from Boston publisher Thayer and Eldridge, enthusiastically offering to publish his poems. The contract was quickly negotiated, and by March 5 Whitman had arrived in Boston to meet personally with his new publishers and to oversee the printing. Thayer and Eldridge announced the publication of the new edition in April, and the book appeared in May 1860. Although no one knows precisely how many copies of Leaves of Grass Thayer and Eldridge printed before the firm went bankrupt in 1861, Whitman biographers and bibliographers estimate 2,000, 2 printings of 1,000 copies, to 5,000, the estimate of Whitman's friend, John Burroughs, a significant increase over the first 2 editions. There were also several pirated copies. In 1879, Richard Worthington purchased the electrotype plates and began printing and marketing unauthorized copies. The 1860 edition of Leaves of Grass was 456 pages long and appeared in a variety of differently colored cloth bindings, orange, green, and brown, many embossed with decorative designs. The book's pages were well printed in a clear 10-point type on heavy white paper and elaborately decorated with line drawings around titles and the beginning and end of poems. The title page and the poem titles appear in various fonts and sizes, and some, like the script-like typography of the title page, are fancy. Scattered throughout the volume are small illustrations of a butterfly perched on a human finger, a sunrise, and a globe resting on a cloud and revealing the Western Hemisphere. The frontispiece is an engraving by Stephen Alonzo Schaff from an oil painting portrait by Charles Hine. It depicts Whitman not as a working-class rough as an 1855 frontispiece, but as a well-coiffured and genteel romantic poet wearing a large, loose silk cravat. In its advertisements, Thayer and Eldridge highlighted the book's elegant design. To the 32 poems of the second edition, Whitman added a total of 146 new poems, the single largest augmentation of Leaves of Grass in its 37-year growth from 1855 to 1891 to 1892. He altered earlier poems and revised their titles. And for the first time, he placed some of the poems in the distinctive, thematic, titled groupings that he called clusters. The 1860 edition includes 7 clusters: Chants Democratic and Native American, a group of 21 numbered poems prefaced by an introductory poem titled Apostrophe, Leaves of Grass, which contains 21 numbered poems, Enfant d'Adam, 15 numbered poems, Calamus, 45 numbered poems, Messenger Leaves, 15 short titled poems, Thoughts, 7 short numbered poems, Says, 8 short numbered poems, and Debris, 17 short unnumbered and untitled poetic fragments. Enfant d'Adam, later called Children of Adam, and Calamus, possess the most thematic coherence as groupings. Whitman retained these 2 clusters in future editions, dropping the other 5 arrangements. There are also 26 individual, uncluttered poems, several of them important, such as Walt Whitman, from the 1855 edition, later called Song of Myself, and A Word Out of the Sea, new to Leaves of Grass in 1860, later titled Out of the Cradle Endlessly Rocking. The clusters and the carefully chosen titles in the third edition indicate an increased attentiveness to organization and structure. The 1860 Leaves of Grass begins with Proto-Leaf, later called Starting from Paumanok, a prefatory poem that announces the poet's intentions and major themes, a poem that deliberately marks the beginning of the book, just as So Long concludes the book. Because of these structural revisions, Whitman considered the third edition complete, although future editions indicate that he later changed his mind. While planning this edition and writing poems for it, Whitman saw his project as the great construction of the New Bible, Notebooks 1:353. In some respects, the 1860 edition of Leaves of Grass looks like a Bible. It groups poems into clusters, numbers, rather than titles, the clustered poems, and individually numbers stanzas in a way that resembles the book, chapter, and numbered verse divisions of the Bible. This Bible-like appearance amplifies the 1860 edition's increased thematic emphasis on religion. In Proto-Leaf, the program poem that begins the third edition, the poet invites his comrade to share with him two greatnesses, love and democracy, and also the third one, rising inclusive and more resplendent, the greatness of religion. Love is the theme of the two most important, most coherent, and most famous clusters. Whitman conceived of Infans d'Adam as a cluster about the amative love of a woman, Notebooks 1:412, phrenological jargon for sexual love between women and men. These poems celebrate procreative sex and the innocence, beauty, and sacredness of the human body. Although Ralph Waldo Emerson urged him to delete these poems, Whitman retained them and their bold, erotic language. Moralistic critics and public officials condemned the Infans d'Adam poems as obscene, while other readers, many of them women, expressed admiration. The companion cluster, Calamus, focuses on the love between men, what Whitman called comradeship or adhesiveness, the phrenological term for manly love, Notebooks 1:413. The cluster's introductory poem, later titled In Paths Untrodden, announces the theme of manly attachment, and the cluster explores the theme in poems that are sometimes joyful in content and sometimes suspicious, anxious, and yearning. The origin of Calamus is a series of 12 poems originally titled Live Oak with Moss, a series that biographers and critics see as Whitman's story about or poetic response to an unhappy romantic relationship in the late 1850s, a narrative about love and lost love. While the Calamus pieces are personal, intimate, often erotic love poems, Whitman insisted that they were political. And indeed they are, for in them Whitman imagines homoerotic affection as the basis for the union and democracy. The politics imagined here are an expression of faith in a spiritualized comradeship. Hence, Calamus is an important example of the merger of the third edition's major themes, love, democracy, religion. More overtly, but perhaps less convincing, political poems are found in this edition's largest cluster, Chants Democratic and Native American. In it, Whitman celebrates democratic America with a nationalistic fervor that can at times sound shrill, especially given the approaching crisis, the bloody, 4-year-long Civil War that threatened to dissolve the United States. Whitman's response to this threat in Chants Democratic, "Oh, a curse on him that would dissever this union for any reason whatever," apostrophe, barely masks deeper anxiety about the impending crisis. Whitman's scarcely contained dread about national divisions and the sometimes suspicious or despairing poems in Calamus mark an important distinguishing characteristic of the third edition, its dark mood. In contrast to the confident, self-reliant persona of the 1855 edition of the 1856 Song of the Open Road, the disconsolate speaker in the 1860 edition expresses melancholy, woe, and painful uncertainty about personal identity, national destiny, and metaphysical order. In the first poem from the Leaves of Grass cluster, originally published in the Atlantic Monthly April 1860 as Bardic Symbols and later titled As I Aimed with the Ocean of Life, the poet walks along the desolate ocean shore, examining the debris from the sea and identifying with the washed-up fragments. He yearns for nurturing from a maternal father figure, but to no avail. The poem ends with an address to the cosmos, a deaf, "You, up there," and an acknowledgement that like the sea debris, we too lie in drifts at your feet. Self-doubt converges with skepticism about the order, benevolence, and responsiveness of the natural and metaphysical universe. A melancholic tone also characterizes A Word Out of the Sea, first published in the Saturday Press December 24, 1859 as A Child's Reminiscence, later called Out of the Cradle Endlessly Rocking, a poem about a childhood encounter with death. Like Leaves of Grass, number 1, As I Aimed, this poem is set on the Long Island shore. The poet remembers observing as a child a pair of mockingbirds and listening to their songs. When the she-bird disappears, the solitary he-bird sings a wild, despairing song. But, unlike the near-nihilist Leaves of Grass, number 1, in which the isolated poet sees himself in the washed-up sea debris, A Word Out of the Sea has the boy identify with the solitary bird and take inspiration in the bird's sad, desperate song. Moreover, the ocean is no longer representative of the enormous, unresponsive universe, but of death, a cool, inviting, erotic merge with the universe. A Word Out of the Sea is certainly a dark poem, full of desperation, yearning, melancholy, and doubt that characterize the 1860 edition. Yet, the focus on death here is notably religious. It leads to a reconciliation with death and the spiritual, maternal cosmos. In addition to selling far more copies than previous editions, the well-advertised 1860 Leaves of Grass received more attention and critical acclaim than the first two. There are 32 known contemporary reviews of the third edition, and most of them are positive or mixed. Only 8 reviews were mostly negative. Women readers and critics, such as Juliet H. Beach, Mary H. Hilton, and the renowned African-American actress and poet Ada Isaacs Menken, greeted this edition with exceptional enthusiasm, defending it against the hostile, sometimes vicious judgments of male critics who disapproved of the candid, erotic passages in Enfants d'Adam. The significance of the 1860 edition of Leaves of Grass tends to be paradoxical. Although the poems often express grief over romantic and professional failures, the book's new sense of structure, the sizable increase in poems, its wider readership, and critical praise made it one of Whitman's most successful books. Although the poems seem more intimate and personal than previous Whitman poems, the third edition is also a deliberate intervention into public life, an attempt to realize American democratic ideals and save the Union. And while it expresses a strong faith in comradeship as the means for realizing democracy, the 1860 edition also reveals a darker Whitman, suspicious, uncertain, and lonely. Here the frailest leaves me, and yet my strongest lasting. Calamus number 44. Although nearly 40 years of Walt Whitman's life were spent in and near Brooklyn, his biographers have given us, on the whole, comparatively little information concerning his activities there. The minute records of the last years of the poet in Camden, aged and prematurely broken in health, which Horace Traubel has so painstakingly preserved, only serve to emphasize the scantiness of the data which we have concerning the life of Whitman as a Brooklyn journalist.
This video is brought to you by The Vine on YouTube and by The Storyteller on Facebook.